All right, welcome to episode 41 of The Expert and the Idiot. Today I'm talking to William Filipek of TJW Exotics. It's the return. You're the first guy to come back for a part two, but I find myself, I'm constantly hitting you up with questions and bouncing stuff off you, especially when it comes to ball pythons, because you're like one of the few people I know that keep them.
Oh man, make me feel special now.
But yeah, I figured it would be good to get you back on. We can talk about breeding Antaresia, because I'm going to have a trio of them here pretty soon, and then getting them started too. But also you've got so many cool animals in your collection. The Sri Lankans, you have African rocks, right? I know we've talked about them before, and so yeah, there's just a lot of stuff I want to get into today. Something we were talking about just before we started recording was the documentary on reptile keepers that's going to be coming up. And for me personally, obviously, I mean, I got anxiety, so I'm already apprehensive about it. I'm already worried that it's going to paint reptile keepers in the worst possible light. They're going to find all of the most psychotic reptile keepers out there, and they're gonna highlight those people. And then, they might even grab some good people and drag them through the mud, and kind of highlight the very worst aspects of those people in their lives. But with all that being said, how do you feel about it? Are you not too concerned?
I guess it's more of when it comes out, we'll have to see then. Because that's right now. It's hard to say because I've been ever since Steve Irwin died, Animal Planet and all them have been picking up that with the show Fatal Attraction and what was another one they did? They did I can't remember, but they've done a lot of these where they have attacked the exotic pet trade in general, but we'd always have reptile people in there. They'd always have something to do with reptile people, being involved in there in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. So, it's hard to say, but if it picks up traction like Tiger King did, and I think for the most part they've gotten a lot of bills hit on them from the government and stuff from I guess it had to do with the Tiger King, or it made more people nervous. Yeah. And it didn't help. I think, wasn't it after Tiger King, they had a bunch of issues with people in Texas releasing tigers or tigers escaping or something like that? Or was that prior? There was some of that happening, but I don't remember if that was before Tiger King or shortly after Tiger King. I know you've seen it where there would be a tiger walking through the neighborhood of a city or not of a neighborhood or something. And it's just this lost juvenile tiger, doesn't know what's going on, and it's Texas, so the guy's outside with a shotgun getting ready to dispatch it, I guess, or at least coax it away from his place or something.
Yeah.
But we see it in Oklahoma had that retic that was loose for a while, and Florida being Florida, I think the one thing I think that's gonna, obviously Florida is going to get hammered. They're going to hammer you guys probably the worst as far as bringing, especially Tommy, because I think it's centered around Tommy and him being in Florida and you guys having the burn stuff down there. I'm sure that's going to be a big focus of them. And there's been a lot. I think that may be another concern is the fact that there's a lot more stuff that have been out since the last reptile attack, as far as documentary style wise they've had. There was what are they called, the worm, why they banned them in Georgia and all that is the lungworm that's been
really
found in berms that are affecting the colubrids, and obviously the berm being a much bigger reptile, if those worms transfer over to a smaller snake or a smaller reptile, it's a lot more fatal for them.
Shit.
So it's a concern that Georgia, South Carolina, I think, and I think somewhere up in Wisconsin, it was an issue too. And I think it had to do with imported animals. So animals that got imported and wild caught collected animals with their native worms and stuff, and then them affecting the native wildlife when they were either released or escaped or something. So
Damn.
that might be one that kind of concerning, well, pretty concerning. And then you had, I already know they're gonna, with the last few years of retics killing people, killing and eating people, that I'm sure they're gonna reflect some of that onto the Burmese in Florida, but it's hard to say. I mean,
Well, I'm sure that they're going to touch on it, and they're going
yeah,
to touch on people
yeah,
keeping retics,
retics, yep,
and
yep,
they might show some of the popular YouTubers that have enormous retics, and
yeah,
things.
yep,
Who knows who from the industry is going to be pulled into it? But Dylan, he covered it really well on his
right.
podcast, and
It
so
sounds like it might be attacking a lot of the venomous community. At least from what I heard there was a lot of, because of the guy with the taipan and
sure.
that kid a couple years ago who, what was it? Did he release that cobra or something in the neighborhood or something like
Mm.
that? I don't know if you remember that, but that was a number of years ago now. But yeah, and then don't you guys have like I don't know if it's a breeding population, but I've heard rumors of like cobra populations in Florida or something like
I
that. They're
have
king
not heard
cobras.
that.
I
I have
thought
not.
this was years ago. Rather, they're like a function of breeding group or just random releases or something.
Oh
But
my God, that's insane.
I've heard that though with like Nile crocodiles and stuff too.
I have heard that. Yeah.
I've heard that, and then stuff like that. But yeah, who knows? It's hard to say. I mean, yeah, I think at some point you hear about all of these animals. Like I've heard of green anaconda being released and having populations in certain parts of Florida, but it's who knows. If it's
Well,
a
I know.
small population, it probably doesn't make a difference.
I know that I think they found a green anaconda, and they did a necropsy on it, and it had a white rat in it or something. So it was obviously like a recently escaped pet,
Right.
but they were trying to paint it as, well, we got anacondas now, and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just more drama for the good keepers to have to put up with, and
Right.
yeah, legislation is definitely going to be impacted by that, because
Right.
the
And I think
legislators are people too, and they sit around and watch
right.
Netflix.
Well, I think it's going to be. I think that's when it's going to fall on our duty to be good stewards of the hobby, as far as educating the non-snake people, like your family and friends, and my family and friends, and you're going to get, because I know inevitably what happens is when shit like this comes out, you're going to get bombarded. If it picks up a lot of steam, you're going to get a bunch of people who are going to message you or try to stir stuff up with you or something like that, and you're going to have to be a good steward and try to be as professional as you can about it, and not be a loose cannon or an asshole about stuff. Just try to be as informative as you can, and try to remind people that this is television, and their goal is to get as many people to watch as possible. So they're gonna, it's no different than YouTube with clickbait. They're gonna
Sure.
hype it up and make it as crazy and extreme as they can. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and like you said, I feel like ever since Steve Irwin passed, that's when things
oh
kind
yeah,
of.
thing at least with like first it was TV. TV once television shows, whether it was Animal Planet and all of them went downhill, and then you had then YouTube took over, and then you get a lot of crazy YouTubers, because then you get the real characters that come out, and a lot of them seem to be in Florida too, and they would give us all a black eye, and then and now you got these television networks that are like Tiger King and all the Netflix trying to picking up these documentaries or whatever.
Yeah, making it as sensational as possible. I might have to
Oh
leave
yeah.
the state of Florida, so I'll probably hold
Well,
off
then
on building my snake building.
I would say then you can get the Sri Lankans and Indians. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
Yeah. I'll be your neighbor.
oh man, I don't know if you
Ha-
don't have to move up here where it's this cold. You can move some. I don't know. Alabama doesn't seem like they get hit with that many laws. I don't. Maybe they do, but
yeah.
I don't. But
Yeah, that would be that would have to I'd have to do a lot of research and find like the most snake friendly state that's also the furthest south, so I
yeah,
wouldn't
they
have to
can
deal with
get.
winter.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you want to deal with the dry either, because then you got the whole West Coast, like New Mexico, Arizona.
Yeah.
I don't. I can't imagine California won't get hammered at some point. I don't know. They seem pretty lenient for the most part, but I don't know. I have a hard time believing that they won't at some point get hammered as bad as Florida. I guess it depends
Yeah.
what ends up getting released. You
Yeah,
know.
I just found out. I saw a news article yesterday about adult websites. You need to enter your driver's license to access them in Florida. So they're just like straight up leaving the state. So it's like, talk about government overreach, like
Right.
into your private life.
Right. Oh man, that's wild.
Yeah, and I guess like the websites are just leaving the state because they don't want to deal with having to keep people's driver's licenses on record
Yeah.
and dealing with that security risk.
Oh yeah. I don't blame
So,
them.
but yeah, I might
Well,
just cut that part out of this episode.
giving people the wrong idea.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean it is news.
yeah. Well, I mean, you have to see when me and Dave are on a podcast together. That gets pretty X-rated pretty quick. Not even about what we say, just what we do.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
The all right, so breeding Antaresia and getting them started. I know that like you're really transparent with a lot of the stuff that you're doing, which is cool. So you've been raising up these Antaresia that you have from your latest season. And what is I mean, first of all, when you're breeding Antaresia, what are you using to try to trigger them to breed? Is it temperature? And
I would say they're pretty easy. I mean, no joke. They aren't much. They're just as easy as a ball python. I think you just cool them down, and you don't really even need to cool them down that much. They just get as cold as whatever else is in that room. But then right before that though, I feed cycle them pretty heavy, and they seem to retain weight pretty easily. I mean, once a week feeding for them, and they're usually good. Like a lot of my other pythons, like I seem to have to feed a lot more. Like my carpet pythons seem to take in a lot more food. But the Antaresia, I mean, once a week feeding a moderate prey item, and they seem to retain the weight pretty well. Because there's like a certain bulk you'd like to see before you shut them off on food, and then start cooling them down. Because that's what I do with my Australian stuff. I feed them real heavy right before I cool, then I cut them off, and then usually right around March 1st, once they go back to regular temperature and daylight cycle, I start feeding them again till they either, unless they're gravid or they're right on the precipice of becoming gravid. So I'll hammer them with food right
okay.
afterwards. So, but I mean, Antaresia, they're pretty easy, man. I mean, there's probably little you have to do to get them to go. I mean, you probably don't even have to cool them down. As long as you're feeding them, they'll probably still go for you. So,
How much are you cooling down your Australian species?
ooh, I try to go for 70. Like, it's very similar to Ryan. Like, December, I just start cooling. So I keep ambient. So they stay around 80 to 82. Sometimes I have to bump it up to 84. It really depends on the room because sometimes, like the ball python room where the PVC racks are up against the external wall, for whatever reason, it leaves a pocket there. And that little pocket will stay in the 70s, like mid to high 70s during the day when that room's like 80, 82. So sometimes I got to bump it up whenever it's cold out. This is during winter that has that cold pocket. So I got to bump the temperature up a little bit more. But either way, at night, it shuts off. So they'll start out at 80, and then they steadily decline till they get to about 72 to 70. And then I'll keep them like that all throughout January. And then February 1st, I start bumping it back up to like, 72, 73, 74, till it hits about 80, which I try to get it right at March 1st. And then that's when everything goes back to normal. They don't get a night cycle anymore. And they get the standard 12-12 rather than a 10-14 light cycle.
Okay. And so your ball pythons are in with your Australian animals?
They're not in with the Australian stuff, but they still get the same. They still get the
Okay.
same kind of cycle. Like I said, certain rooms, like the ball python room, seems to need to be bumped up a little bit more during, instead of 80 to 82, I bump it up to 84 to 82 during winter, and then the miscellaneous, or where all my Australian, Indonesian stuff are, they seem to be, that room stays a little more stable because it's a bit smaller, so it'll stay 80, 82 year round as far as like daytime temps, and they still get just as cold as the
Okay.
ball pythons. And then the big snake room is the same. The only one that stays a little warmer, but it doesn't really matter because it's the baby room. The baby room here is, it's not against an external wall, so it stays a little bit more It still gets cool, but it usually stays around, even in the coolest temps, maybe around 75, 74 at night
And
in the
do they have
coolest
heat?
time. No, well, during the day they'll bump back up. They're ambient too. I keep them ambient. I
Okay.
do run occasionally, like if I have some animals that seem to be like newer babies that are being stubborn feeders, I'll give them a little bit more heat. So I'll actually, because all the racks still have heat tape, I just don't run them. Except for when I have those stubborn babies, then I'll run a little bit of heat. I'll have like one thermostat set up on a day-night cycle, so they still get a night cycle. But then during the day, they might, instead of 80, 82, they might get an 86, 87, something like that during
Right
the
on.
day. But that's only if they're being a pain in the butt, like if they're not eating regularly or whatever reason. There could be
Okay.
numerous reasons for it. It may not even be heat. It could be because for the most part, the babies are pretty sterile setups as far as like paper, and uh, they usually don't get a hide. But if I have to, I'll give them a hide or a little egg crate for them to either climb on or hide under.
Why no hide?
It's just I just don't feel like cutting up all the little like egg crates for them. That's really all it is, because it'd be a bunch of them. But it's a nice, cheap, easy way to do it. You give them a so something like a ball python, I'd give more of an egg crate to. Something like a carpet python, they get more of a. I give them those little like garden plastic green fencing or whatever that's
Yeah,
called.
yeah.
It comes in a big roll and just cut it up, and those are their little, not a boreal hides, but they're little perches,
Perch.
I guess.
Yeah.
And if they're still being a pain, sometimes what I'll do is I'll take either a toilet paper roll, the cardboard roll, or the paper towel roll, and I'll cut up the roll, and then I'll use that as a hide. Sometimes even the paper towel itself, if I crumple it up, like with Antaresia, I'll do it with, or you could do it with paper, and you crumple that up, and you kind of put it. It was an old Kevin McCurley thing I remember seeing years ago, where he would just use either the paper or something like that as like something for the snake to go under if it wanted to. There's all kinds
Yeah,
of
I
cheap
I,
methods you
I
can
remember
use.
seeing Rob Christian do that with a
Short
blood
tails.
python.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
with
seen
short
it.
tails. Yeah, he was
Yeah,
talking about using the paper for them to be able to hide under.
right. Right. Yeah. No, that or substrate too. Like I try not to use too much substrate with babies, only because I do shows quite a bit, and when I preventamite stuff, I just don't like. I prefer using paper or some sort of like paper substrate over actual like loose substrate or something. But I will use it if I have to. It's weird. Some like ball pythons seem to prefer substrate. I don't know, and they don't really even burrow, which is the funny part. It's not like some species where like you'll see them burrow through it, so they actually seem to get. I don't know if it's an enjoyment or some kind of comfortability being able to sub or burrow through it. Like I got
Yeah.
blood pythons, all the blood pythons and short-tailed pythons seem to like to sit there and ambush like that.
How many short tails do you have?
Four now, and I just picked up three Borneos.
Nice.
Three
Who'd you get the
Borneos.
Borneos from?
Chris, he's not. he's just the state over next to me. He's in Kansas. He does a lot of the Indians and Sri Lankans. He has a lot of the founder stock, but he does a lot of Bloods and Short Tails. And I met him up at not him, but I met his girlfriend up at the Overland Park All American Plant Expo, Reptile and Plant Expo. I was vending at, and I met his old lady, and he had some of his Borneos, and he had the believe it or not, it was a very. I love brown. I'm in the like earth tone colors, and
Sure.
she had some of his. He called it genetic stripe, but all it really was I have to send you pictures of them, but they're like real dark chocolate brown against yellow.
Hmm.
I don't know if it doesn't sound super appealing, but I'll have to show you pictures of it. It's super
Yeah.
duper pretty, man. I'm really into those earth tone colors. Like I'll take that all day over like some bright neon yellow or orange snake anytime.
Yeah,
Personally, with
it's.
me.
I mean, I think that people are sleeping on the Borneos.
Oh,
They're
dude.
awesome. They're the smallest short tail too. So like if somebody had like a space constraint, like that's a good direction to go. And
The
yeah,
pumpkin
they're
heads, from my understanding, are even smaller. They're the northern Sumatran. So the pumpkin heads are northern Sumatran short tails, and then the traditional chromes and blacks are the southern. They're not distinct species wise; they're just different look. You even see it in retics too, where you get the you can even call them the silver heads and the yellow heads retics. You'll get those looks too in the retics on Sumatra. So it's not that they're genetically different, just locality wise. That's just those traits seem to persist better on those parts of Sumatra. So from my understanding, the pumpkin heads are the smaller of. They almost have more of a Borneo look,
hmm.
oddly enough, where they have more of that earth tone color. Well, browns and silvers compared to like the silvers and blacks or jet blacks and that the southern Sumatrans will have.
Yeah.
So I've been digging the pumpkin heads too, man. But I'm just like I don't need all these short
Oh,
tails
I
right
know.
now. I'm
I've said it. I've said it a million times, dude. Like short tails is a slippery slope. Like if
oh
you were to
yeah,
get into them, there's so much there to get into.
they're so pretty, man, and they're just such a cool looking python too. I mean, they you like the Sri Lankans and all that. I mean, short tails are personality wise, they're almost similar, especially the wild caught ones. Or if you get a real angry short tail or blood python, they're real similar to a Sri Lankan or Indian python, where they're just super intimidated by you and get real huffy. But then if you if you don't if you don't if you don't listen to their bluffs or their hissing, they'll let you know that they're not happy with you. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
they'll fly out after you. So,
I've got a pair coming from Kara. Uh,
ooh,
yeah.
it's
So
bloods.
yeah, a pair of bloods,
Oh,
and
I've been looking at some. I've been drooling over some, but I'm just like, man, I'm just like, I can't. Right now, I've been really looking at the pumpkin heads right now, man. After the Borneos, I was like, they had pumpkin heads there, and I'm just like, and I don't even like the T because the T positive Sumatrans are in the pumpkin head, the northern stuff. And I don't even like the T positives. I just like the normals. But then all the T are the normals. That I think of most of the stock of the northern Sumatran or the pumpkin heads or originated from VPI. And I think almost all of them are either hets or visual T positive stuff.
hmm.
So they're
If you want to lose your mind, look at Stephen Tillis's Borneos. I
oh
mean,
really?
yeah, I mean, like just all of his albino stuff and everything is gorgeous, and and he's driving distance from me, which is
No, that's
not a
real
good thing.
dangerous, right?
I mean, luckily, I'm at the point I have no more room. There is no more room in my house. What I
Right,
have is
right.
what I have. So that's a saving thing right there.
Oh, trust me, you get a building, it'll really. Then your mind starts thinking, what kind of cage can I put here? What kind of species could I keep in that corner? And
Oh
what
yeah,
could
I
work
can't
in this
wait.
room?
I
And then
can't
like
wait, dude.
that's probably the one good part about Australia not exporting their stuff. Because could you imagine the Antaresia localities, moors, the different species you would get? And it's
Yeah.
just like, oh my god, I think I would have to give up most of my ball pythons just to make room for a lot of the intrusion stuff, and I could have even more of them. That's
Yeah.
the messed up part. So,
Yeah, it's I mean it's wild. You see some ball pythons how big they are as
oh
adults. It's
yeah,
like god dang, that's a huge animal.
yeah. Well, I don't. I see. The thing is, I don't know if we're gonna see a whole lot of those monsters. I remember hearing a lot like Ben Russo and Trumbauer and all them talk about. You just don't see those monster ball pythons that we used to see back in like the '80s, '90s, and stuff,
Mm.
even the early 2000s. But I think that a lot of that has to do with the feeding method we do now is different than what we did 8 years ago. You know, because now ball python people are a lot more feed them like adult ASFs or small rats, so you keep them eating all the time
Yeah.
compared to where back in the day we would just feed them as big of a just like you would feed a berm or a retic. You would just give them the biggest rat they take, and you would feed them that till they go off food because they have enough fat storage that they don't need to eat anymore. And I think that's why we don't see, or we probably won't see some of those true monster ball pythons. Because I remember that we don't. A lot of people just don't keep ball pythons long enough to truly see a monster ball python. Because I remember going to the St. Louis Zoo behind the scenes like over a decade ago, and they had like 30, 40, and even 50-year-old ball pythons. I mean, no joke. They had them in neodecia cages, and they had these big black hides, like the extra large hides, and they would have a ball python sticking its head out of this hide, and it looked like a juvenile Burmese python. Like this thing had just
Whoa.
enormous enormous heads, and I'm just like, and then people goes like, oh, my ball python, there's no way they can eat these jumbo rats or retired breeder rats. I go, they will. Trust me, I've done it, and I've fed what most people would consider way too small of a ball python. Some of those prey. I think people in the ball python community just forget how a python can eat really big prey items, and a ball python is a python, so it can eat really big prey, and I can prove it too. I have a bunch of 1,500, 2,000 gram ball pythons that'll eat retired breeder rats all, well,
Really?
not all day, but they will eat them. So,
Yeah. That's bananas. I is it possible that I mean when would a ball python start ovulating? When would you see that?
ooh, I think it depends on how you feed. Because I think if you feed weekly, bi weekly, whichever, I think that's why you get a lot more of that inconsistency. With my ball pythons, I notice it seems like summertime is when a lot of mine start going, oddly
Mm.
enough. Most of my other pythons might go more in the winter and spring, but my ball pythons start picking up. And even when I moved from the old room to the building, they even in the old room they would always go in the summer. When I moved them, I expected maybe it to be more chaotic, but for whatever reason, a lot of the ones that went still went all in the summer. It didn't
Hmm.
seem to change. Even weird part is even because I gave them a gradient in the old room, so they had a hot spot and a cool spot to a completely ambient temperature, but still getting a night drop, and they still went exactly where when they would go, which I
Huh.
thought was kind of unique because most people they're just all over the place, you know,
Huh.
with their ball pythons. But for whatever reason, mine typically like the cluster, and you get a few outliers too. But I think you would see that in all species. Like I had a, she hasn't gone. I don't know if she'll go this year, but I had a super caramel jag who would go. She would ovulate in December, regardless if there was a male in there or not. She would ovulate and slug out, ovulate and
Wow.
slug out. She did this for like 2 or 3 years in a row,
I was
and
just
then
going to ask, does there have to be a male present for them to ovulate?
oh no, I've had
And is it like can you just see it that they're ovulating? Is
oh
it
yeah,
visually?
oh
Dude, I
yeah.
think my like how old? When does that start?
I think it just depends on how much you're feeding them in the beginning. Because Daniel Latouche says he's seen this in retics, uh, scrub pythons, green pythons, and I think maybe not him, but uh, um, oh, what's the Australian guy? The Rich Shine, he's seen it in water pythons. Like I believe he's given a rough age estimate, but they'll breed at like a year and a half to 2 years old,
Hmm.
which is astounding because most people go, "Oh, you can't breed these species till they're 4 or 5 years old."
Yeah.
But Daniel Natusch has proven it with four different species, and we've seen it in ball pythons will breed at a year and a half to 2 years old. Burmese pythons will do it. Antaresia definitely will do it.
I got to send you a picture. I think my girl is ovulating right now.
Oh, the ball python.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty. Has she been eating?
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say she's ovulating yet because usually when they get ready to ovulate, they'll go off food.
Okay.
Typically, I've only experienced a few pythons who will actually eat during or even after. I've only ever had one snake, and it was a carpet python. She would eat after she ovulated, so the follicles are already eggs at this point, and she
Yeah.
still would eat, which was wild. I go, wow, I can't believe she would still eat.
Well, I think it's been probably 3 weeks since she's eaten last because I have been
Okay.
doing larger meals but less frequently because
Okay.
she just seems to pack on the weight like crazy too.
Oh yeah, yeah. You'll
Like,
notice that with certain pythons too. Like certain individuals will pack weight on easier than others. Like I have I have three Darwins, an albino and a het and a normal, and the two normals will pack on. They seem to take longer to pack on the weight, but the albino, man, she'll just. If I gave her the same size meals as often as I give them, she would be really fat. Well, I've
mm,
done it before where she put on too much weight. So I feed her smaller meals just a little more often. And then whenever she does get the weight that the girth on her I want, then I back it up. Or if it's already in breeding season, then I just don't feed her at all.
what do you we were talking about the Antaresia and exporting them out of Australia and everything and how cool that would be. What do you think about the New Guinea spotted pythons? Like I'm kind of surprised you don't see more of those being exported or
Right.
imported rather.
I wonder it's hard to say what the stigma it's sometimes it feels like it's kind of like it gives me that unless it's a truly a different species, sometimes that gives me that blue tongue skink vibe where like all the blue tongue skink guys love Australian stuff but care less about the Indonesian stuff and won't even bother with it unless it's some crazy morph they can hybridize in with the morph Australian stuff or the few morphs they do have. But
Hmm.
there's like this they'll only mess with the Australian stuff, but they won't mess with the any of the New Guinea stuff or Indonesian stuff. They won't mess with them. So, and carpet pythons are a little bit different. Obviously the Papuan carpets have picked up in popularity the last few years. I remember for the longest time they were considered the quote garbage snakes. Most people didn't seem to like them that much years and years ago. But
Now
they've
people get
picked.
really excited about them.
Oh yeah, some of the stuff Ben, Nick, and Eric and all of them have been posting have really been catching my eye. I'm kind of waiting, and oh Riley's another one. I watch his stuff too, and I've been watching a lot of their breedings of them, and I'm just like, man, I want some of those like real dark browns with like the yellow cream pattern,
Yeah.
and there's and the orange coming up from the belly too.
Some of them
Some
almost look like a jungle carpet python. Like
Yeah,
sometimes you
I've
see
seen
it
that. Yeah.
and you're like, it's like a
Yep.
jungle carpet with brown instead of black.
Right. Yeah. No, that I've seen those too. Yep. And like, believe it or not, I'm not a big fan, and this goes with the Darwin look too. But I never was a big fan of the hypo look. You know, where there's hardly any black. It's just like the I don't even know what like the tan orange and then the cream or bone white pattern. I was never a big fan of that. I love dark stuff. The darker you can get it, the better for me.
Yeah, that's how I feel about the Brettles pythons. Like I have
Yeah.
no interest in any of the hypos or anything like that. I want the Afors line, where they're really dark and
Right.
yeah, that's
Right.
that's what gets me excited.
Oh yeah, no, I'm with you. I love the dark stuff, man. That stuff has always caught my eyes, and even if you're a morph guy, if you like the darker stuff, it's going to translate better to a lot of your T negative, T positive stuff. It's just going to make it more vibrant if if you breed it into that darker stuff than if you bred it into the lighter stuff.
Yeah.
It's always been a problem with the ball python community because they always want to add these lighter color mutations into the albinos and T positive stuff, and then they get these just mellow, these like real like uh, mellow yellow looks and this ugly pale colors, and you're just like, man, you're doing the opposite of what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be adding darker mutations into that lighter stuff to get more of those vibrant colors.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
you see that with a lot of the ball pythons where they end up with like a white head, and
yeah,
like this
white.
super super reduced pattern.
Yep, yep,
And for me, it's not attractive at all. It's not what I'm
right.
drawn to.
Yeah, no, I like the contrasty stuff. The bright, yeah, I like bright colored stuff, but like I said, you got to add the right stuff to it because you can go south quick if you add too much light stuff or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So no, I'm with you.
I want to look into the pop one spotteds more. I want to see like I don't know. I just like to me it sounds pretty cool. Like being able
Oh
to
yeah,
like get spotted pythons that are actually available to us. I'm surprised that's not a
right.
more popular option.
Well, it's always been the downfall with like Antaresia in general have always, even in Australia, they get made fun of to be like the dirt snakes and stuff like that. But I think it's unfortunate, but I think it's because of the morph thing. It's if there were morphs, like I'm not joking. I tell people all the time. I'm not saying they would dethrone ball pythons because I don't think anything can truly dethrone the ball python morph stuff
Hmm.
because of because of how, because I think people just think, oh, because it has a morph, it can be a contender to dethrone something. But I think people don't look at a ball python, just the base form of a ball, like a normal ball python. Essentially, they have such good contrast that when you add morphs to it, it already has a good foundation. When you're talking about like these hog noses, children's python, or not children, but Antaresia in general, morphs, carpet python, they don't have as stable of a pattern as the African stuff. Like at least not all African stuff, but like the ball pythons. Another species that would be a pretty strong contender would be a Burmese python, but the
Hmm.
Burmese pythons they just obviously they get big, so they won't ever be that
Yeah.
ball python because of the fact. So that I think that's something you got to take in consideration is like what is the wild type? Does it have a stable pattern? Does it have good contrast? Like the stark browns and oranges that the pattern can be, and then you got that stark brown, either dark brown or black background pattern. Really complements a lot of morphs when you start adding morphs or getting morphs in a species compared to a spotted python or Antaresia where they either don't have pattern or they have real fragmented like spotted pattern. So the
Hmm.
morphs are they're just going to be a lot more limited on what
Yeah.
you can do with that. You're not going to get like an inchy version of a children python could be totally different than what an inchy and a ball python looks like.
Hmm.
Or, you even see it in um, like the Indonesian African stuff compared to like anything across the Wallach line, right? So all the Australian python stuff, the Indonesian Australian stuff, the Indonesian African stuff, that stuff is all the mutations you can tell, and some of them act pretty different. Like look at like retics are the only species outside of Timor's. Retics and Timor's, the Malayo pythons are the only ones that are more closely related to the Australian stuff than they are to the African stuff. Like
Really?
the ball pythons, and ball pythons are more closely related to like the Indians, the rocks, the short tails, and stuff like that, compared to the Timors and the retics that are more closely related to like your scrubs, your liasses, and stuff like that. So look at like the piebald ball python and the piebald Burmese python and the piebald blood python. They all generally look exactly like that species would look like if they had pieds in those respected species.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as far as like the weird patterns you get with like them, and like they still retain some of that real, almost their usual colors that the wild type would have. And then you get something extreme like the retic pied, which is, I mean, it's nearly silvers, blacks, and grays that, you know, that are pretty drastic compared to what the wild type retic looks like.
Yeah.
And you get a lot more. And then on top of that, a lot of those species, particularly with ball pythons, you rarely get white-headed pieds unless you're adding a certain mutation that takes the melanin away from the head, compared to retics, where it seems a lot more common that you get a lot more white-headed pieds.
Mm-hmm.
So chances are, if we start getting more, I wish I could remember, because I think it was a Stimsoni that has a pied, or potentially a pied. I can't remember what it looks like, because I was just telling Jeff Jr. and Dave this on their podcast. I was like, it's a shame I don't remember, but I think it's because if I can't get it, why would I keep looking at it? Because I don't want to pour salt in the wound type of deal. But I'm willing to bet a lot of those species, their pieds are going to look a bit different than, say, the pieds we have in like our Indo-African stuff, you know.
Now that there's a lot of Antaresia morphs in the UK, right?
As far as I know, there's only been the black, what do they call it? The black eye stuff, and the I think they primarily have everything we have. I think the only thing I heard different, or that is different, is the pearl pygmy python. I don't know if you follow that. It's like almost kind of gives me like an ivory look.
Okay.
I do believe, but I mean, if the Antaresia morphs were ever able to be available to everyone outside of Australia, this is where me and Junior could have a little debate about, but I think they would at least take over like the hognose sector of the market, because they get very equivalent in size. The only difference is I think most non-snake people think hognoses are cuter than, say, the Antaresia, but sure. I don't necessarily think that's like a hard, fast rule. I think some of the Antaresia can look pretty cute to some people, because just sheer fact they're small and they have like a bit of an attitude similar to like a hognose would have.
Yeah, they both want to eat you.
Yeah, they both. It's just one will just try to eat you, being the hognose. It'll just come out with its mouth open and try to eat you, while the Antaresia will try to constrict you, then try to eat you.
Yeah, you know? Yeah.
So yeah, I think they could be a real strong contender, as far as, if it's unfortunate that it would take the morphs to do it, but I think it's just a part of the hobby at this point. You know, if there aren't any morphs, there's only going to be a certain amount of interest in something. Yeah. To a degree.
Do you still have that female spotted that you produced that's super, super light with the dark spots?
Yeah. Yep.
That thing is so nice, dude. I want to buy that so bad.
Oh yeah, it's wild. It's drastically different than its siblings. I mean, all the other siblings are pretty standard. I had a few weird striped ones, not like the stripes you have or the Ryan stripe. Yeah. I guess it's Canadian bloodline stuff. Yeah. But I've been wanting to pick it up though. Pick up some of that stripe stuff. I'm into stripe stuff too. If it's not dark stuff, it's striped stuff. I'm a real sucker for it too.
Do you are you going to hold that female back, or are you going to sell her? Because I think you should. I think you should like hold her and line breed that, and like make make your own line that's like super awesome and light. Yeah. Because that contrast is what's so cool about that. She's got that super light.
Yeah, I think, and you know what too? I think that would be perfect, because he's darkened up, but I remember the father, or the male, when he was that young, he had that similar look, not quite as distinct as her. Yeah, but he's definitely darkened up a bit, so I expected to probably darken up some. I don't know how much, but I'm willing to bet she'll darken up a bit. But I could see that. It's just so many projects. That's the only problem.
You got a whole building, bro.
Yeah, well, what the problem is, you start stretching yourself thin, because like what is it like right now I'm working with a lot of the ivory stuff. I'm hoping this will be the year where I make a lot of Palmerston ivory stuff. So
Mm,
more striped ivory stuff that has Palmerston blood in it. Not Palmerston blood, but the ivory bloodline in it. So I can work on that striped white, essentially striped white snake at some point. But that takes a lot of space. And this is going to make me sound crazy. And I know a lot of I think most snake people will think I'm crazy for this, but I got offered not too long ago. Someone offered me an adult male, pure Sumatran retic.
mm,
And anyone who knows about the Sumatran stuff, that's where the original ghost bloodline came from.
okay.
And everyone who likes the ghost retic stuff always loved the original ghost retic because of his bone white head. And the
Hmm.
problem with the ghost, well, any retic morph in general, it got bred into all the other subspecies or species and localities, regardless if it was a silver head retic or a yellow head retic. It was all bred interchangeably to each other. So my I I'm kind of want to try to get as bone white as I can with the the retic stuff too. But that's like that's like one of those like you keep back a pair of animals and you this is gonna sound bad. You either cull the rest
Ugh.
because that's still a mainland retic, and it's because like I said, this is pure Sumatran stuff. Like I think the original stuff because I got my two animals, my mainland females from Ryan, and Ryan got some of Ben's. What at the time I don't even think they were Ben's. They were the guy who originally I can't think of his name, but there was a guy who brought in the ghost retic, and they bred it into like Sumatran Malaysian crosses, which genetically are the same thing. There's no outside of there being an ocean or ocean water between the two places. 4 or 5 thousand years ago, that wasn't there. So
Hmm.
genetically and even phenotypically, they look identical to each other. But I want to. I got two females from that, and then this guy offered me some pure male Sumatran, and I was thinking, I go, I probably shouldn't do it, but a part of me kind of wants to see if I can get, because even the female I have now, she's not totally white like the original father was, or grandfather, I guess, in this case. So I
Hmm.
kind of want to see how white, if I can retain and get that bone white head, the same as the original ghost male. I don't know. And like I
So you
said, that
can't you
takes
can't hold back one spotted python because you're doing
man,
that.
maybe, well, maybe. I don't know. I might. We'll see. Like, and you got to take in consideration this building's expensive too.
I know.
I gotta try to pay for some of this stuff. And
Yeah.
this year wasn't bad, but it was also it could have been better. But like I said, I moved a lot of stuff during breeding season. So like January 1st, I was moving stuff in here, so it was a bit of a cluster for sure because I was right in the heat of breeding stuff, and
Is
well,
that a metal building or is it wood?
wood,
Okay.
yeah, wood
And
building.
it's insulated?
Yep, spray
Do,
insulation on the outside. We didn't do the ceiling. That's just standard. Uh, what you call it, insulation. Drawing a blank on it, but yeah, it's just standard insulation on this.
fiberglass
Yeah,
or
fiberglass
yeah.
stuff up there.
How much did
So
that blow in? It's the spray, like the expanding foam. How
yeah,
much did that
yeah.
set you back?
Oh, I can't remember off the top of my head. It's been a minute because we've had it from. I'd had to look at like an invoice or something because I can't remember off the top of my head.
I've
Wasn't
been
cheap though. It was pretty expensive.
Yeah, dude. Like I've been looking at it, and I want to get like a 20. I think it's a 24 by 35 metal building, which is like 8 or 9 grand. But then
Yeah.
the slab is 8 or 9 grand, and
Oh
then
yeah.
the insulation, the expanding foam insulation for the building would be 8 or 9 grand. It's like everything is 8 or 9 grand. It's crazy.
Oh yeah. No, it's ridiculous. And I don't. Are you going to do anything if you with the Are you gonna epoxy the ground, or are you gonna
Yeah.
just leave it? Okay,
So that's like
there you
another
go.
3 or 4 grand.
Yeah, I mean, that stuff. So I remember when we were debating, Ryan. It was Ryan that had this flaked epoxy.
hmm
It was where it's epoxy. They put one layer of epoxy, and then they take these flakes, and it adds more texture to the ground. And the only reason I did the textured, it's kind of a pain in the ass to clean, to be honest with you. At first, it didn't seem that bad, but once we had to get the drywall in, and we had to walk through some muddy ass grass, getting the dirt off of it is a bit more of a pain than I realized. But
Mm.
the reason why we did the textured stuff was because I have to sometimes be up on a ladder or a stool or something like that to look in either racks or cages. And particularly with the big snakes, I wanted something where, because sometimes if the ground's slick and you jump, I didn't want to like slip and tear something. So I wanted something
Yeah.
with a little more texture so my feet had something to grab or shoes or whatever. Because I'm not a big, it's weird. I like walking around in bare feet, but I don't like walking around with snakes that can latch onto my feet. So I try not to like walk around barefoot in here.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the reason why I went with the flake. There's something with texture to it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
in case, because like I said, not saying it would happen, but my luck, I can be kind of a klutz. Didn't want to slip and fall, or I have to jump off because my face is too close to a cage or a rack that I shouldn't have been that close to with a snake that loves to come out to give kisses, if you know what I mean. So yeah,
Yeah, I've been looking into just kind of all the stuff and what it would come out to, and yeah, it's not cheap. It's not a cheap project. And I'd probably do
um,
like a drop ceiling too cuz it's a metal building, so I'll probably do some kind of a just like a drop ceiling and have fluorescent lights put in, and
right, right,
yeah.
yeah,
It'll be a whole thing.
right, yeah. No, it's a project for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean,
And
once it's
that
done, it's like it feels, I don't know, you feel like you've accomplished something. I guess it's like,
yeah, spending money.
yeah, 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 and then you're hurting for a while. You're like, oh Jesus, like I went from like, man, you know what I want to start doing? I want to travel more. Get a building? Nope. That just cut that short.
Yeah, I can travel to different rooms in my building.
Yeah, that's about as good as it's getting right now.
I think, well, and when I do mine, like if it's the 24 by 35, I'm just going to do one giant room. I don't think I'm going to divide it up. I thought about doing that, and then I'm like, nah, I think I'll just keep it one giant room. That way the AC can work easier. And honestly, the one end I'll probably make into my gym. Like a 10-foot section of it will be gym.
Oof. Gonna have the
What?
gym in there too, huh? You're gonna
Yes.
you're gonna keep it ambient, or are you gonna do gradient?
Uh, Gradient. But it's going to be a
Okay.
consistent. I want to keep it at like 80 degrees during the day, 78,
Okay.
80, and then, but still provide a hot spot,
Okay.
just with, a bulb. I don't know. I can't cross that bridge until I get to it. Like I feel like I'd
Right.
have to figure it out then.
Right. Right.
But yeah, well, dude, I love a hot gym. I mean, I'm in Florida and my garage
Oh
is my
yeah.
gym right now. So,
You
dude,
monster.
the summer when it's 90 92 degrees out, I love to just open up the garage and just sweat to death, dude. That's
Yeah.
how I do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like a lot of fun. Oh God. Yeah.
I do. Well, what's funny is like if I've ever gone to a air conditioned gym, which has been like maybe like 10 times in my whole life, I can't function. It's too cold. I feel
Yeah.
weird.
No, I'm with you. Like if it gets like when it's in below freezing or anything, I start getting sharp pains in my knees and everything's just super stiff, and it's like I got to get on the treadmill and like do a little bit of walking before I actually start lifting anything.
Yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't help. I got like real stiff ankles. So I got to stretch my
Mm,
ankles out and stuff too. So I don't, because I got like real stiff ankles. So when I squat, I got to loosen them up. Otherwise, then my heel will want to raise. And the reason why I had to go to flat shoes because when I did the squatting shoes or weightlifting shoes, the raised heel, it
Yeah.
puts so much pressure on my knees, man. That's it. That's how I ended up tearing my quad because I jumped into a competition too quick, and I got didn't get used to the raised shoes because it was to also help with your depth, so it looks so you got your ass a little bit lower,
Hmm.
but my knees weren't ready for it apparently because I ended up tearing something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the video you sent me, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Folded me
that's
like a lawn chair. I was like, whew.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
terrible.
So
Yeah.
now I'm starting to use the elevated heel shoes again to at least build more. Well, at least make my knees feel a little more stable because yeah, that was horrible.
I put a 2x4 under my heel, and then I do goblet squats with like a 55-pound
Right,
kettlebell. That's
right,
good
right,
enough.
right. No, that's at least you're doing something because like especially when I was younger, my mindset was, well, if I put enough weight on my back, it's gonna force my heel down. But then you realize you don't want to force stuff like that because that's how shit gets, torn and tears or breaks even. So you're just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, I shouldn't be forcing stuff. Your body needs to be ready for that kind of load. Otherwise, you're just setting yourself up for disaster.
Yeah, for sure. The yeah, the pops and cracks and everything in my knees lately have been like very unsettling. I'm
Yeah,
like
I know.
I must be getting old.
Yeah, and then when you talk to someone like Nick, he keeps telling you, "Oh, you haven't seen nothing yet. Wait till you turn 40," and then it just keeps going downhill. I go, man, it's doing it now. I don't even know if I'll make it to 40 or my body, anyways.
I know. I had friends that listened to Nick's episode, and they're like, "How old is that guy?" Like, and they thought he was like in his mid 30s,
Yeah,
and just I mean he's getting after it.
yeah, I know. He's a monster. I hope I can keep going like that at 50.
Yeah. So getting back to the Antaresia, how are you getting them started? What's your process for getting them going?
Usually first thing I do, I kind of cheated this year. I didn't do what I usually would do. I usually first round, I just throw pinkies in. Just throw them in there live, or with, right out from the bin from when I collected them from the rat side or rodent side, and I just pluck them in there. And then I kind of go back and look after a while. I'll leave them in overnight, and then I'll check and see if anything ate them. And if they eat them, then I mark them, with a sticker saying feeding, and then I take them out, and then the ones that didn't eat, I'll do it again. Or when I do it again, I'll unscent them with like an unscented soap, like a hunter soap or something like that, to get
Hmm.
rid of the smell. And then I throw those in there. And then if any of them eat them, then I put a sticker that says unscented, so I know these guys are eating unscented pinkies or something. And it's you got to keep track of it though too, because I noticed you can't get a lot of bouncing around. Like the stickers just to let me know that it's eating. I don't actually do. You know how when you buy a snake from like Nick, and I think Ryan does it too, where they give you like that little like the sticker that has the tally marks on it or the dates on it of how much they've eaten and what days they've eaten.
Hmm.
Well, I don't start doing that until they're eating unscented pinkies regularly. It can't just be a one-time deal because I've had some animals where they've eaten once an unscented normal pinky, and then the next week they don't want to eat it. So then I have try it again the following week, and they still don't eat it. So then I got to go back and do unscented. Or if they don't do unscented, I do a trick called cupping, where I take one of those little serving cups, and put them in there with the pinky and then a lid on it, and keep them in the tub, and then see if they eat. And sometimes that works.
And
Sometimes
that
it
pinky is
doesn't.
alive.
Yep, yep. I do
Okay.
live,
What?
and
What? Okay. So are the pinkies that you're like descenting, are those live as well?
yep, yep,
Okay.
yeah. It's so like with it's funny because I do live with the Antaresia, but if I got to do it with a carpet python, I'm obviously because they're bigger babies, they can eat hopper sized prey. I'll do frozen thawed with them, and they seem to take to that pretty well. I got like 6 baby carpets now that only want unscented frozen thawed hopper mice. So I got to wash like a handful of little mice for them, but I won't do it with live. It's just a pain in the butt to do. You don't want to have a active little hopper mouse that you're trying to rinse off like a dog or something, and then let it dry for a while, and then throw it into the. Because I let them dry for a minute. I don't like throwing them in there soaking wet and all that. So I let them sit there and air dry for a moment, and then I throw them in there with the snake.
Yeah.
So
I've got one jungle that is just eats quail. All he eats is quail. And then I've got 2 other jungles, 2 new ones, and I'm giving them hoppers, well, mice rather, but I'm not descenting them. I'm trimming some quail down and just putting it right on top of their head. And that seems to get them to strike. But like if it's not like fresh down, they'll bite and wrap and then they'll leave it.
yeah.
So I don't know if I should keep doing that or if I should try descenting them and just remove the scent instead of adding the scent of quail, which they seem to go crazy for. I don't know. I don't know if I'm shooting myself in the foot and I'm just going to end up with a ton of jungles that eat birds.
Yeah, it can be hit and miss. Like I've had some babies I got established. They were eating mice, and then all of a sudden they decided they didn't want mice anymore. So I had to go back to unscented quail scented mice, and then eventually it became less and less, and now they're eating mice again. So I've had that happen, and then I've had situations happen where with you, I had a female that was a mouser. She didn't want rats. When I was in my old room, I eventually got her to start taking rats. Then once I moved her into here, she reverted back to not wanting to eat rats anymore. So then I had to start offering her mice. And eventually the switch came back on and she started eating rats again. And then I had a Palmerston jungle. This snake was, when I got her, she was great. She was eating mice, fine, all that, did everything like her siblings did or all the other jungles I had did. Well, I went to go this was years ago. I did the old, you ever heard the cup trick when you take photos of carpets where you put a cup over them for a while, you let them settle down, and then you take it off to take a picture of them? Yeah. Well, I was doing that. Well, I kept her on maybe the surface was too cold, maybe I stressed her out too much, but she was a baby, and I left her there for maybe 10 minutes, grabbed photos, moved her back. Once I did that, she became a horrible feeder. She just would drop it and kill it, or kill it and drop it, kill it and drop it. You had to keep offering her, and then she would take it every once in a while. And she was like that for years. I mean, she's tiny. Like if I showed you a picture of her, I mean, oh man, how old is she now? She's a 2016. And she is like, I don't even know. She's even smaller than that. She's maybe that big. And she is just tiny, tiny. Well, I moved her into this building and put her in pretty much the same size tub she was been in. And the only difference is she's in ambient now. And she's on substrate. I moved pretty much everything. I kind of had a 50-50 paper substrate thing in the old room. But once I moved everything out here, everything got moved to either aspen or coconut husk, one of the two. And I moved her into here, and boom, she started taking, because the only thing she was taking, she was one of those where she would just eat enough to live, and the only thing she would eat was mice. Moved her in here, started taking rats every week. I mean, she was just pounding rodents.
What the hell?
So I decided I was going to try to breed her and see what I could get out of her, because I was like, well, I guess I'm going to, because she's probably one of the better, well, maybe not the best stripe now, but at the time when I bought her, she was probably one of the best striped Palmerstons I had. So, but now since I've been breeding Palmerstons a few years now, I have better looking ones. So I'm going to try breeding her to the ivory stuff. I'll cross her to ivory stuff to try to get more striped stuff in it.
Yeah. That's wild. What do you think triggered that? Do you think that she was too cool and then the ambient, like the more consistent heat
Sometimes I wonder that, and I mean, I'm not kidding, dude. These snakes went from like they had a gradient temperature, and they had inconsistent lights. So essentially, whatever I went in there, the lights were on and off or whatever. Now they get a 12 to 10 14 light cycle. They get a lot of natural light because each room has a pretty big window in the front of the rooms, so they get a lot of natural light too. So I mean, they went. I mean, shoot, like a 360 almost environment. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
so I don't. It's hard to say. Maybe she will. I haven't palpated her, so maybe she will breed. Uh, Maybe she's going through a cycle now. She looks a little plump, but I mean the males haven't shown much interest. So I have something I want to talk about real quick that just recently happened to me. Right.
sure.
So with carpet pythons, most people will jump the gun and put two snakes together and just assume if they combat that, oh, I got two males. Well, I can attest to you, always double check the sex. So I had two not Palmersons, gelatin carpets, and I had them in tubs before to try to breed them, but they were one of those animals I just didn't put that much energy in, so I never really got anything from them. So I moved them into this room, and I pounded the shit out of that female. So I got her pretty thick, right, getting her ready to breed. I started introducing them, the male. Well, literally the day I introduced them, that female came right out of the hide, and they start combating just like two males. The whole trying to one over the other, exactly like you would see in two male combat.
Huh.
Well, I went, shit. I had these two males together and they did fine. Now they just can't stand each other. So I go, well, I guess I got to double check their sex. And this happened to me twice. I had an ivory jungle. I had two ivory jungles I was pairing together, and they did the same thing. I mean, not quite as bad as the gelatins, but I mean, there was still some sort of combat with one another. Well, I pulled the gelatin out and probed her, and I go, nah, this thing's probing a female. Unless what Ryan and them said. Sometimes if they have enough bad sheds, it can build up and clog some of the work, so you may not get that deep of a probe. Well,
Yeah.
I went, shit. Well, that could be the case, maybe. So I was like, maybe the probe isn't that accurate. And it's a pain in the ass to probe not a big, but an adult carpet python by yourself, because you're trying not to get bit, along with you trying to stick a probe up both sides of the vent. Well, I decided after I probed her, I go, man, she's probing a female. And then when I went to go put her back, and this is what ball pythons really helped me get used to doing, but palpating, feeling follicles. When I started putting her back, I was like, boom, 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 boom. I felt follicles in her. And I go, well, shit, she's building follicles. And follicles, if you feel follicles, that's just automatic. Well, it has to be a female. So I waited maybe a week later, threw him back in there, and he started courting her, locking with her. So just wanted to throw that out there for people who pair their, and this could go for virtually almost any snake.
Yeah.
Just be careful and don't just assume because they're combating you have two males. Because I've seen it in ball pythons too, where the female just wanted nothing to do with the male, and she would just toss his ass around the tub. Like you would think, you were like, wow, I got two. You would assume, oh, I have two males, but it was a proven breeder female I've had on a clutch of eggs. So it's not a male.
Damn.
So sometimes you can just put the male in at the wrong time, and she just doesn't want anything to do with them. So
what do you think about cohabbing snakes, keeping snakes together?
Well, if you got them in a big enough enclosure, I don't think it's a problem at all. It's just the problem is, like, I obviously being a breeder, I only have so much room. So even in some of my bigger cages, I mean, there's only enough room that they can get so far away from a particular male.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and even combating isn't like a surefire way, because right now I have two Darwin albinos that are being a pain in the ass, so I just threw them together. in there with the male or in there with the female in her cage, and they're both sitting in the hide box together, not doing anything, right on
No
top of
shit.
each other. But I have done this before with that exact pair of albino Darwins, and I've walked in one day and saw blood against the front of the glass or the door, so I know they will fuck each other up,
Damn.
but it's weird. It's very random. They might. It's just like one day they just get tired. Either the female hits a certain part of her follicular development, or they just like humans, you just get tired of each other at some point, and you get ready to throw hands for whatever reason, essentially. And I think that might be the case with some snakes, because I've even seen it in ball pythons where they're cool with two males will be cool with each other all the way up to the point of either they're not, or the female is at a point where they're more sexually driven, so they don't want the other male to breed.
Mm.
And I've even seen it where even the female's done ovulating and they still fight with each other, but while she was building, they didn't care if one another was in the same area with each other. So it's real
Mm.
weird. It's a very fickle thing. And
Yeah.
it's, I think you just kind of, you just got to be observant, and you got to pay attention to that kind of stuff if you're interested in the breeding aspect of things. Because like we like to think some of these are hard fast rules, but none of it, all of it's black and white. I don't think any of it's like that. Oh, if you have two males together, they're going to kill each other. Obviously, there's some species you just don't want to take that chance with. You know, like
Yeah.
I've seen it in retics too. I've had some. I remember we had two retics for whatever reason. It was when I worked with Ben. A guy needed a male breeder, so he had a stack of 4 foot cages, and the one male was at like second from the bottom, and the other male was up top, and he wanted the one from the bottom. So instead of just pulling that bottom cage out, we just swapped cages. Put the one he was keeping on bottom and the one he was looking to move off, because he was giving him the cage and the snake. So he just took the top cage with that snake in it. So we cleaned both cages out, disinfected them, all that good stuff. We put the one male we were keeping in with the other male's cage, and then that male into his cage. Well, the one male we moved to the bottom, which he started bucking, freaking out. He tossed the water bowl. He was all revved up, ready to go. Well, the other male, he didn't give two shits. It didn't faze him at all. He was just kind
Hmm.
of going on with his merry way. So sometimes, it's very individual based, and it could be time of year. It just seems real random. It doesn't seem like there's a rhyme or reason to. Rather, I think the females might be more based off of where she is follicular development wise, like if she's willing to deal with that male or not. And then not vice versa, but with the male, I think it's just kind of either they're sick of each other or they're not. But if you got a big enough enclosure and they can get far enough away from each other, oh, what is it, Reptilandia with their big
Yeah.
enclosure, something like that. I mean, shit, I think they keep two male uh, croc monitors and one female or something like that. And
Hmm.
you know how monitors can be. If you got two male monitors together, they'll duke it out with each other for sure.
That's what I've been thinking about, is keeping my diamond pythons together. What size enclosure would be ideal, for a trio, because I plan on having eventually two trios in two outdoor enclosures. So that's kind of my goal. I'm thinking right now probably just 8x8x6 or 8x8x7, something like that.
Oh, that would
And
probably be plenty of room. I think it would
yeah,
be.
yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking. And just put a bunch of branches in there and cork hollows, and I'm gonna deck it out with bottle brush. Get some Australian plants in there, and
Right. You know what? Like you can keep them out there year round though. But I always thought someone who had a really cool setup, and he lived in a southern state, Louisiana, but um, Sean Bradley, Exotic by Nature. When he was doing a lot of iguanas and stuff, like rhino iguanas and green iguanas, he had this cool. it was separate from a snake building, but he had another smaller building, and he had all these outdoor enclosures attached to the outside of this building, and then he
Mm,
had on the inside a bunch of indoor enclosures because you know, Louisiana still has some pretty cold winters, especially compared to you guys still.
yeah.
But so he had a place where they can stay indoors, and I always thought that would be cool if I could. But I even in Missouri, there would only be like a period of time I'd be able to even like diamonds or Brettles, I'd be able to keep them outdoors. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you can't do anything outside.
yeah, not really, yeah,
But you can
yeah,
keep Sri Lankans, so
yeah,
you're
yeah.
lucky in that regard.
Right.
How many of them do you have?
Right now, Sri Lankans I only have a pair, and then Indians I only have a pair. I've been talking to Chris, and I really want to pick up another because he got a clutch I think this year from his original pair to an outcrossed female he got from someone. So I'd like to get at least a male. I told him he said he got like a 7.2. I said I'll take a male if you got a male. I don't mind. I don't mind having extra males of that stuff. I usually keep my males pretty small anyway, so I'm not usually that concerned about having extra males and that kind of, especially Indians and Sri Lankans. I don't want a big ass male. They're
Yeah.
already a pain in the ass to deal with. I don't want to have to deal with something that's huge that I got to deal with.
Are they that bad?
Oh man, I haven't. My male can be huffy, but my female man, she lost her mind when I got her out last. When I went from moving her from a her baby tub to a little bit bigger tub, and she just, my God, she lost her shit. She just as soon as I touched her, she tensed up, and then she launched herself. And when she realized she couldn't hit anything, she turned around and ran. Luckily, it was in a corner of a room. But she started running underneath these ARS racks. And I tried to grab her. When I grabbed her, immediately turned around, tried to jump at me, let go of her. She just turned back around to get under the racks. And then she started crawling up the rack in the wall, like climbing up it, using like an accordion, just getting up the rack. And this is what all my white lip pythons are. And I'm like, God, she's in the tub of terror right now. I'm like, she starts popping these tubs open. I'm gonna be fighting for my life to get all these assholes back into their tub. So I'm trying to pull her out because then she starts weaving in and out of the rack, and I'm like, oh my God, she's fucking driving me nuts right now. Because then if you touch her, she immediately try to turn around and launch at you. So it's like this whole ordeal where I'm pulling the rack out, trying to get her out, and then she's trying to bite me, and she's pretty good. She's probably that big around and maybe 6 foot.
How
So
old?
she 2 years old,
Okay.
and she's eating like jumbo rats. She has some size to her, and I'm just like, oh my God, she's just like, she's not even an adult yet, and she's already this bad.
How big
So
do you think she'll end up being?
I think it's all on how I feed her. So judging on how big of an asshole she can be, she's not going to get very big. I'm going to keep her. I'm going to keep her on the bit of the reasonable side.
How
So
often are you feeding her?
right now, I'm maybe not every week, but right now I'm probably feed whenever I have retired breeder rats. Like I got some now. I'll probably feed her and all the other like the rocks, the Indians, and the Burmese and stuff too. So I
Damn.
just start feeding the mainland retics. I just start feeding them like rabbits.
Oh,
So,
really? Dude, I just got my my first litter of rabbits this morning.
oh man,
Yeah, my youngest kid came running in the house and he's like, "There's baby bunnies, there's baby bunnies." And I'm like, God, I wish these kids would just leave these wild rabbits alone. It didn't even click. Like we're breeding rabbits, but it just didn't click. I thought that they found, because
a
dude,
nest or something. Yeah,
yeah, them and the neighbor kids, they found a nest a while back, and like I picked up this rabbit and ended up dying somehow. I don't know if one of them dropped it and another kid stepped on it or whatever. None of it
right,
was intentional. It's just kids.
right,
You
right.
get 5 or 6 kids together, and
Rabbits, baby. I don't. I think it might be a stress thing. I've heard of that before, where people like they try to take in a baby rabbit and it just dies on them. I think it's
yeah,
just a stress thing. If I had to guess. So,
Well, and I was just talking to Ish because it's funny. I posted the picture of the baby rabbits, and Ish hits me up. I'm literally standing there talking to my wife, saying maybe we should put a camera on them and see if she's feeding them, because she's like on the opposite side of the cage. She's not even near them. And Ish just messaged me out of the blue, and he's like, "Hey, don't freak out if you don't see her with the babies. They only nurse once or twice a day, and the rest of the time they're away from them." And I'm like, dude, how the hell did you know I was just freaking out about that? But yeah, we're on the path now to breeding rabbits.
you know, the messed up part is it is actually easier for me to get big prey items like hens, roosters, and rabbits than it is for me to get small rats, medium rats, and all that. It's actually
Really?
cheaper. I don't know if I should be saying this publicly, but we have a pet store local to us, and they told us, yeah, once we get these rabbits and they get a certain size, nobody wants them anymore. So they said, hey, would you trade, like, I'm not joking when I say this, will you trade 5 adult mice or 5 adult rats for this 4 to 6 pound rabbit? We don't even know how big it is, other than it's a big ass rabbit. So we don't know the weight, other than it's within that size range.
Yeah.
And we said, absolutely, we'll trade you 5 adult mice or rats for that one, 6 pound rabbit or whatever. And then, like, we get adult hens, like retired hens, for like $4 or $5 or something
Whoa.
like that. So I mean, we're just like shit. If people could keep big snakes, it almost might be more reasonable to breed big snakes than it would be smaller snakes. But obviously, just because you can feed them easier doesn't mean people need to be working and keeping with big constrictors like that. But
Yeah.
it's just funny. I thought it was odd how it seems to be easier to get big prey items than it is to get. And who knows, if we had nearly the number of big constrictors that we did other, like the ball pythons, I'm sure it'd be a totally different story.
Yeah,
if you had to feed 12 big snakes compared to like 100 or 50 or 100 big snakes or something like that. So,
Yeah, that's like my Argentine boa. I think I have her on extra large rats, but I'm doing like one every 3 weeks because she gets round if I do more than that. But I mean,
right.
boas just they digest a lot slower.
Yeah.
And but yeah, Roy Stewart, he's like 30-40 minutes from me, and he was saying that he's got like jumbo rats. Like, he doesn't know what to do with them. Down here in Florida, there's not many people that need anything that big.
Yeah.
So I gotta hit him up and get some of those from him, because she can definitely take those. She's about the same size as your Sri Lankan. Okay. She's about the same size.
How old is she?
She's 3.
3. Okay, so a little older than my stuff. All right.
Yeah, she's 3, and she's about 6.5 foot, and I think she's like 7 or 8 pounds, somewhere in that range.
Okay. Yeah, I'm astounded by, like, out of all my big snakes, I got at least python wise, I got the mainland retics, the mainland burns, the Indians, the Sri Lankans, and rock pythons. And boy, I tell you what, it is astounding how a retic, the mainland retics, like, girth wise, they don't necessarily, at least until a certain age range, they typically use a lot of that length, or that food towards length. And you'll sit there and you'll go, I can't tell if she's growing or if they're growing, but then they're in their 8-foot cage and you see them wrap around this cage and you go, holy shit, these guys are big. Like, I think I'm like, these like, it's funny, I got almost all my big constrictors around the same time, so they're all generally around that same age range, so around 2, maybe 2.5. And the mainland retics are almost 11 foot.
Oh my God.
And I feed them. I mean, it's funny, they're probably the same girth as my mainland burns, but I mean, they're probably only maybe that big around, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, the Sri Lankan and the burns are probably around the same girth, but I mean, they got like shit, either twice the length or 4 or 5 feet on them, something like that. So it's nuts, wild, dude. It's just wild how they just utilize it towards length like that. It is astonishing for sure. The burns aren't too shit. I mean, they grow quite a bit too. I mean, they're probably pushing 7 or maybe 7, close to 8 foot now, and they're about the same age, 2.5.
How big?
So,
Like, what size enclosure do you plan on keeping the retics and the berms in?
well, the burns, the retics are going to get walking enclosures at some point because those guys are just like it's right now they're in 8x3x2s, and Jesus Christ, it is astonishing how quick they're filling out that cage. So they're
Yeah.
eventually going to go into walking enclosures, but we'll get the wood for it first, build the frame, and then we'll worry about the inside because we're still debating, or I'm still kind of debating what I want to do for the inside. If I'm going to just originally, Ryan was like, I would just use the truss core that he has for his rooms and I have for my room, the reptile rooms, anyways. He said I would just use that. But I'm just like, but
Those are
it's
the wall
hollow.
panels?
Yeah, the panels, but
Okay.
they're hollow.
Huh.
And if I press up against one, I can. It doesn't give per se, but you can tell. Like if I really put my ass into it, I could probably put my arm through it if I wanted
Really?
to. If I wanted to, I mean, but I'm a big guy still. I'm not
Yeah.
tiny, but or if I put put some strength into it, I'm sure I could. So I'm
Sure.
just like, man, a retic. I think might if she has nothing to do all day, she might be able to put herself through that wall if she wanted to.
You're
In my
overthinking
opinion.
it.
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
It's
But
like you think you live in a horror movie, like you're going to come in and the retic's going to burst through the wall.
yeah, I'm just like, I'm thinking about taking the other option we were thinking about is getting whole sheets of PVC for each corner of the wall and then plastic weld at least the bottom and the tops just for the obviously because they're going to be moist too because I'm going to use
Yeah,
coconut husk for the floor and they're going to be just humid so I don't want leaking through the cage or anything.
for
So
sure.
that's why I was listening to you and Ryan and talking about the plastic welding because I was looking to get into doing some of that for
Yeah.
that enclosure. But that's just one idea. That's what I'm thinking about doing. But I'm gonna have to get the wood here soon because those retics you can tell are just gonna blow up. It's like they try to grow into their enclosure as quickly as possible. Is what it feels like. But eventually the berms will probably go into their enclosure, and I don't know about because I don't plan on. I don't know if I plan on making them a walk-in enclosure. I think they might be okay in the 8-foot enclosure, but
Nah, man, you got to do a
they could.
walk in for them.
Well, I would, but now I'm running out of space now. Believe it or not, but I don't. I don't know. I don't plan on getting them gigantic either. Like I don't. The retics I don't plan on getting gigantic like compared to what most people get their big retics, but those retics, man, they are super active too, man. They really do. They actually like burrowing too. I noticed they like going through the substrate. Like
Huh.
those two mainland girls will shove their face through the substrate and they like try to burrow around. So they kind of, I don't know. They seem to be more into the substrate than I think most people
My Timors do
realize.
that. Do
Oh,
you
really?
notice that with your Timors?
I haven't yet. I haven't noticed it yet with them.
Yeah, they tunnel around. In fact, one of them was going into shed. And so you know how they are before they go into shed. Like they just get shitty like all around.
Yeah.
And like, so she had like substrate like packed into her lips and everything.
Oh,
And
mine does that. Yeah.
yeah, it was a mess. And I hit up Ryan and he's like, I'm like, should I try to, and I actually got all of it out with a Q-tip and she didn't piss on me. Don't try figuring that out.
That's amazing.
I know I can't figure them out at all, dude. Like sometimes you take them out and you think everything's good and then they bust all over like a water balloon.
Yeah.
And then other times you're sitting there with a Q-tip and with mine, I can actually hold their heads in my hand. Like I can like they'll, if they're just cruising around and being chill, I can just wrap my hand around their head and just hold their head and they stop moving. They freeze.
Right.
So
right.
I don't know why they can be so laid back sometimes. And then
Mine are bipolar, man. My male's a little more chill, but my female, man, when you get her out of her, she's usually not too bad in her enclosure, but when you get her out of her enclosure, you could tell she gets really uncomfortable about it. She gets real
Mm,
tense, and then she'll just skip the pissing stage and go right into that just light you up stage. And she's
wow.
big too. She's probably as thick as your wrist. I mean, she's a pretty girthy ass snake, and I don't want to get bit by her at all. Yeah, so I try to avoid that.
Yeah, how big? I'm trying to remember how big Ryan said his female was. I think he said his male was like as thick as like a Red Bull can, and his female like a beer can. I
Damn,
th-
Red Bull kid, shit. My male's tiny. He's almost the same age, and he's
oh,
maybe that
really?
big around. I mean, he's not. He's probably not even much bigger around than yours are. I kept
Yeah,
them small. I'm just like I couldn't imagine having two of these the same
yeah,
size, that
yeah.
bigger size.
I'm gonna dial my males back, and I'm very grateful that I only have one female. I've got two males and one female, and I think I'm gonna dial the males back and try to maintain them. But I mean, man, they burn through food like so quick. It's
Oh
crazy.
yeah, no, it's insane. Like if you're trying to breed that female, you got to hammer her with food. Like if I don't have retired breeder rats or something to get that female, I'll give her like anywhere from like 3 to 5 large. I'll basically feed her till she tells me she's done. Like she'll quit looking. She'll quit looking like she's hungry. Like she'll always keep her head up, and then whenever she's done, she'll retreat back and she won't show much interest. So I'll feed her anywhere from like 3 to 4 or 5 large rats,
Oh my
medium to large
god,
rats.
dude!
Yeah, I'll put them to her too, man.
How long is she?
She's probably 6.5, 7 foot, maybe give or
Damn.
take. She's not super long, but I mean, she got some girth to her. I mean, I would say she's about as thick as like a soda can or something, maybe
Yeah.
somewhere around there. So, but it's hard to say because I don't put my hands on her because I know when I do that, it's game on. So, but she's girthy. She got some girth to her for sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I want mine to be chill. I like all my animals to be where I can take them out of the cage and they're
right,
chill.
right.
So
You like them reasonable.
I like them reasonable. Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't like you, the way you describe your animals. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Maybe it would go busting through one of those walls. I don't know.
My retics, believe it or not, my retics are actually pretty chill. The only so I got a couple species of retics or localities, whatever people want to call them. But I got the mainlands, the Southeast Asian, so the big ones like the Sumatran, Malaysian type stuff, and then I got the Calitos or the Jampienzas,
hmm
and then I got a pair of Slayers or the Saputrii, and then I got the Malukus, the Halmaheras, or the Maluku Philippine stuff is all fairly closely related.
Yeah.
So the Halmaheras are horrible. I mean, you want to talk about attitude wise? Those guys are mean. Those guys are
Really.
really. I mean, they always trying to bite you and stuff. And I remember a few people, even Rodney, has said you gotta feed the hell out of them. I go, yeah, but I see what some people have when they have these adult Halmaheras. You can tell they're starting to get a little fat. When a snake has that little head and then the blown up body, you can tell that
Yeah.
animal's getting a little too chunky. And I mean, when you see a Halmahera retic, when it's smaller, it has one of the biggest heads I've ever seen compared to like a mainland retic or definitely compared to the Jampienzas. They all have pretty narrow shaped heads,
Yeah.
almost similar to like a Liasis like head. And then the Sapudrii they have a bit more of a robust head. But the Halmaheras, like they got just real chunky heads. At least the two I have some relatively chunky heads. So I think I don't necessarily devote too much, not devote, but I don't really think that's necessarily the best way to do it is just hammer them with food. It's kind of like a kid that's throwing a hissy fit and you just give them whatever they want. It's kind of
Yeah.
feel like it's the same way. Oh, it's just going to be an asshole, so I'll just keep feeding it. I don't necessarily know if that's the best route to take with them. So I feed them like I feed everything else. And if they're going to be dicks about it, because I look at it like this, there are a lot of pythons I keep that act kind of similar to the Halmaheras. And if I did the same thing, I would just have big fat snakes. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep them the same. If they're little assholes, I just won't get them that big. That's my
Yeah.
method. People go, well, I got to feed them to calm them down. Well, just don't get them that big. And honestly, they'll probably breed better for you like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
That's
that
just my opinion on that.
Rich, I just had Rich Crowley on, and he was saying the same thing. That was a big thing that people did with the short tails, is they would feed them to try to chill them out, and they just end up with obese, angry snakes.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. I just I don't subscribe to that method of chilling a snake out because they think it'll mellow them out. I go, yeah, I don't know. I'd rather keep them smaller and a little more hungry than fat and, more lazy. And I don't even necessarily know if it would make them more placid or just a little slower
yeah,
because they can't move quite as fast as they were lean, mean fight machines.
yeah.
So that's,
Dude, I can't get over the color and the pattern on the Timors. I mean, it still blows me away. Like a fresh shed Timor, and you take them out and just, I mean, at least on mine, the ones that I got from Ryan, the yellow and
oh,
like the
yeah.
green and just the pattern is so crazy. And it's like,
Here,
it's,
I don't know. Can you see that? That's the wild one we caught in Indo.
oh yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know. I don't know. Like, it's super freckled. Like if you look at it compared like to the ones I have and the ones you have, this one had a lot more granity look. Where
yeah,
color wise, it almost from the how like ours have a pretty distinct color differentiate from the tail from the upper body. Well,
yeah,
this one in particular, it blended pretty. It was pretty evenly colored. Like it still had more pattern up in the upper half of its body, but it still had a lot of freckles going towards the tail compared to that stark, almost lavender look that some of the Timors we have in captivity would have.
yeah,
So, no, I agree with you. They're one of the prettiest pythons on earth. It blows my mind more. If you were into retics, I don't get why Timors weren't like second best. It's not like, if a carpet guy likes carpets, they generally like all the carpets and either work with most of them or a lot of them, like
yeah.
we do. And, like I don't know who would be another. It's weird how it works. Like Antaresia, if you're into Antaresia, generally, if you're into one, you're probably into all of them.
Yeah.
If you're into short tails, you're probably into that whole complex. And it kind of like this list, like if you're into one, you're usually into all of them. But ball python people, I'm seeing it more now than I used to. But it's now I'm starting to see more ball python people into the Angolans.
Yeah.
They're not into the rock pythons. I don't blame them for that, but they're getting more into like the Angolans and stuff like that. And then like with the retic people, I don't know, they seem like they're into the crosses and the hybrids, the Morse and all that, but they're not into the Timors. Now I'm starting to see something dangerous where it seems like people are really getting more into like the Timor retic hybrids, adding it
Yeah.
into their Morse stuff, but. I mean, it is what it is. And then berms, like it's weird. Maybe it's because they're harder to get than a lot of the other stuff. But berm people don't seem to be as interested in the like Indians and Sri Lankans as
Yeah.
like other people would be.
Aren't the Angolans more closely related to the Afrox than they
Yep,
are to ball
yep,
pythons?
yep, yep. No, they definitely are. Yeah,
Huh.
they're more. I think the three like the South African rock and the Central African rock and the Angolan, I think are more closely related to burns, while the ball python is more closely related to the short tail complex. So I don't know if it's been changed, but I believe Dave and Tracy in their ball python book referenced that they didn't know for sure. They think that maybe there was two colonizing events where like the the species that originated that would originally become the berm and the rocks and all them made a trip or came over from either Europe or India and made its way over to Africa and then split off into those three species. And then the
Hmm.
same thing happened with the ball python with the original species that would become the short tail complex and then Regis, if that was that species.
Wild.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think it's pretty neat try to understand all that stuff, I think is pretty cool. So that's
Yeah.
why I think there's
Well,
so
I
much
mean,
to be interested in this.
yeah, I mean, that's what's so cool about the Timors to me is they look so much like retics. I mean, you see a picture of a retic and the face structure and the scalation is so similar.
Oh yeah.
It's but yeah, they're such an underappreciated snake, and I cannot believe that there's not more people working with them with projects to get more captive bred animals.
Yeah, I never got that either. I mean, because even look wise, like they're just so much prettier, in my opinion, than well, not so much prettier. Some wild type retics are super, super pretty, but I
Yeah.
mean, I think they at least are on par with them, or even better looking than most wild type retics. But I think it, dude, it's. I think truly it is the morph thing that really, especially with the retic people, man. Because when you, especially nowadays, or even back in the day, a lot of retic people wanted the retic community or the retic hobby part of the industry to become very similar to the ball python part. And even when you listen to a lot of the retic community talk, they're trying to take steps like a ball python breeder or the ball python side of things, which is I don't necessarily think it's right,
It's
especially when you're
bananas
talking.
because of the size of the animal.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
It's
now they're
so
trying.
crazy.
Well, now they're trying to use the super door stuff as like a marketing ploy now. But I mean, I think they're trying to do the team wars as the same thing. Like I heard one guy who works with hybrids trying to justify it as, oh, well, team wars are hard to breed, so it makes it easier to breed if you breed the retic to it. I go, then you don't have a team war python.
Yeah.
You just got like even the 50-50 hybrid looks like shit. Like, I mean, it's neat looking, but it doesn't look as good as either a wild type retic or a wild type Timor. You
Yeah.
know, I think you just made it look shitty. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really get why their justification for it, but it is what it is. Like I said, just don't expect me to buy anything from you, which I would assume you wouldn't care because, you know, I'm just one person. But I think when you start doing shit like that, it's like, you're just dealing with a bunch of hybrids in your collection, and I think that's when you start losing appreciation for what that animal is. You
Yeah.
like a snake, but you don't like a particular animal. It's kind of like you like a dog, but you don't like the whole canid group as a whole. You
Yeah.
just like that dog. And I think that's when we start get disconnected from why we like snakes in the beginning or to begin with.
Did you see that post on the hybrid group of a couple months ago where it was like a boa and a python locked together?
Oh God, no! I've seen videos and pictures of people like pet shops or something putting boas and pythons in the same tub or cage, and they're breeding, or the boa's trying to breed the ball
Yeah.
python, and I go, "Wow, that is insane to me."
The most disturbing part of that post was not the fact that it was a boa and a python locked up. It was how dirty the cage was. Like it looked nasty, dude. It was
Oh yeah,
disgusting.
oh
It
yeah,
was disgusting.
oh
But
it's
still, I mean, I wonder what like a ball python and a Timor would look like. A T-ball.
oh God, oh Jesus. I just got on. I just was on the podcast with Junior and Dave, and Junior was like, I would pay you. Oh, he was throwing a $3,000 if someone bred a rock python to a blood python, and I said, I'll do it, but if I do it, you get all the babies and you have to keep them. And he's like, "Ooh," he's like, "Maybe just one." I go, "Yeah, you say that till you get bit in the face, because I can tell you what, I'm almost willing to bet the personality of that animal would be similar to like a Sri Lankan or Indian,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
super unpredictable, almost the same size, probably girthier, probably would have a bit more size or weight to it." I go, "It just sounds like a horrible idea, man. Why do you want to make your life harder?"
Yeah. That apparently the pair I'm getting from Kara, she said the female is like awesome, like super laid back, super chill, feeds great, all that, but she said the male's pretty spicy. So
Yeah.
that'll be fun.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I got so my golden eye female super chill, the female, and then my male T positive golden eye is a horrible little asshole.
Really?
He so it was funny too. It's just so weird how this works. So when I quarantine stuff, they all go in the same rack system. generally, and they get gradient because they go into the house. They're not into this building, so they go from a gradient tub. So that tub is whatever the rest of the rack is. So it's around 86, 87, and that's pretty warm for a short-tailed python for the most part, or at least from what I've noticed. And boy, he was a rocket. When I would pop that quarantine tub open, he would just woof, come flying up. You could see he'd be in the back of the tub like one of those hissing cats, all hunched up, getting ready to go, and then just come flying out. Well, then after quarantine, he came back. He came into the room, the ambient room, and he got substrate, all that. Because blood pythons, man, they love to burrow, man. They love burrowing
Yeah.
and stuff. So they get, he gets put in the tub, and he mellows out for a while. He's really chill. Like, he doesn't. Yeah, I mean, I never really got him out a whole lot to begin with, but the times I had to, he was always really mellow and easygoing. Well, last couple months, he started flying back out. Like, as soon as I touch him, he would huff up, turn around, trying to bite me. And when I grab him, he would come flinging out, trying to bite whoever was either in front of me or me. And I'm just like, what happened? You like reverted back to the quarantine stage again.
Oh,
So
man.
I'm just like, okay, I see how it is. I won't get you very big, and you're just going to have to be just watched, I guess. And he's pretty,
Yeah.
man. He's really – you ever seen Nick Bottini? That's where he came from. He's Nick Bottini's GoldenEye T-positive stuff,
Oh, man.
genetic stripe stuff.
That's
It
awesome.
comes from his stuff, and he's gorgeous. But, man, he is a rocket with teeth.
Yeah. Well,
Oh, my-
luckily, mine is not that bad. Kara said that he's a jalapeno, not a habanero. So
Oh, man, that only kind of spicy, huh?
yeah. She said he's
yeah.
not, and she's kind enough that she said she's working with him, so he's better when he comes my way.
Yeah. So, like, I would consider, so, yeah, he's a jalapeno for sure, but then the Indians are like a Carolina Reaper or something. Yeah, they're pretty. Those guys are worse, believe it or not. So,
Damn.
but yeah.
And
no.
what about your berms? I'm assuming they're just puppy dogs, right?
Oh yeah, I mean they get like right now they're still in big boa tubs, but they get real because they got the glass fronted ones, the ARS tubs. They'll come right up to it when start looking around because they assume they're getting fed.
Yeah.
But no, once you get them out, they can be huffy, pretty huffy. They're probably the most vocal out of almost any of the pythons I have. They'll start sounding like a deflated tire or something. But they never really bite. They always, like I said, maybe if I stuck my hand in front of their face in the cage, they'd probably bite. But other than that, they're super chill. They're actually, I am thoroughly surprised how much I enjoy the berms. I enjoy them so much. I've been looking into getting some pieds because I actually really, really like these animals. They're big, easygoing, easy to handle, and still give you that big snake vibe, without being a total dick.
Yeah.
I'm shocked how much I actually enjoy those guys. So
Do you think you'll ever get into the dwarf berms?
Oh, I got one female.
Oh, you do?
Waiting. Yeah. Now she's the total opposite. She's kind of a firecracker.
Really?
I got one from Michael Pinnell, and she's a firecracker. Those guys like the burrow too. They're very similar to the blood python. She'll sit underneath the coconut husk and peek her head above just leave a small enough hole for her head to come looking up at.
I didn't even know that you had the dwarf berms, dude. You got like everything.
Well, I only have the one. They're another species where it was like, God, they're so expensive now. I remember when Bob Clark produced some of the first ones in the U.S. and they were like, I don't know, $650 a pair. Now it's like 4 or 5 times that, and I'm like, Jesus Christ. So they're cool. I mean, they're neat, and they're another one I don't want to see disappear from the hobby. I hope the people who are breeding them can keep going with them and keep them going. Because they are a neat. Because I know people are wanting to do the same thing they did with the retic stuff. They want to do with the berm stuff. It's kind of like follow suit after that. But it's like, well, let's get the dwarf berm stuff established before you fuck it up and put it to a bunch of hybrid stuff. I don't know if you remember this, but I remember when the first rough scale pythons that got brought into the U.S. for the uh, pet trade, because Terry Phillip got some for the uh, was it the reptile garden for the zoo out there, but
Yeah.
then years later they got him in the U.S. and one of the first females brought into the U.S. was bred to a carpet python. The first
What?
female, one of the first females was bred to a carpet python. I mean, they didn't even bother establishing them in the U.S. They just fucked it right up and put it right to a carpet python. And you know what it looked like? It looked like a carpet python. It just looked like a shitty, ugly jungle carpet. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what was the purpose of that? I mean, you didn't
Yeah.
make anything better. It made it actually harder to tell it was rough scale in it.
Ugh.
So I mean, yeah, we're all pretty good in the hobby. Just probably in life in general, but in the hobby, we're definitely good at fucking something up right away if we can.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, so yeah, it was, it's ridiculous. So I hope that the berm community will at least work on getting proc shy established. Which Michael Pinnell's doing a good job, and I know Michael's a purist guy at heart, so he's not going to go messing around and getting them all screwed up for everyone else. But I know a few
Yeah.
other people that have some of those dwarf berms around, so hopefully they can get going with them and get some more established lines going and stuff.
How old is your
Stuff.
female?
Oh, she's a last year baby.
Oh,
She's
okay. So she's a baby.
Yeah, she's not. She's probably. Eh, she's not very big. She may be 2 feet, 2.5, 3 feet, something like that. She's within that range. She's not very big. She's maybe about as thick as one of my index fingers or something. But I feed
Okay.
her small rats. I mean, she's eating small rats.
I had gotten two Argentine boas and they both regurged, and like the one did it its first week and the other one I think it took like 2 or 3 weeks, and I just had to like change my whole strategy with them. Like I had to way back off, and like they eat every 12 to 14 days as
Okay.
babies, because otherwise they'll, I guess they just like get too backed up and they'll just puke it up.
Yeah,
So
another species that does that, and it doesn't seem like a hard, fast rule, but for whatever reason, it seems like they still do it enough to where I've heard quite a few people talk about it, but they don't publicly talk about it. But Angolans seem to have that issue too. Angolan pythons, like if you back them up or feed them too much, they'll regurge,
mm,
and it's weird. It's like if I feed my female, I can give her a big rat, but if I give her a big rat, you can't feed her for a number of weeks. If I give her small rodents, I can feed her quite a few weeks in a row. But I guess if she hasn't defecated in a certain amount of time and she's getting too backed up, then she'll end up regurging part of the rodent or something like that. So
damn,
I've
I
been
had one and she prolapsed.
Oh yeah, no, I've had that happen too. Well, if they keep regurging, it dehydrates them, so I could see how that could cause a prolapse. I had one of the male Angolans do that. It was one of those I just couldn't get it to keep down any rodents or whatever because they're big enough to be eating small rats pretty easily. So I would treat them like other pythons. I kept trying to offer them. I would space it out, but I would keep offering them the same small rats. Well, what the male eventually ended up prolapsing because of it, but now he's doing fine. I've, once I got it reinserted, I guess, if you will, and then got him going, he's been doing fine. I have
How
one
did you
male.
treat the prolapse?
I use that preparation H, put him in sugar water first, and then that preparation H with a big probe and shoved it back in, and then he was good to go. Waited a few weeks to feed, or a week or so to feed, and he's been doing fine. Couldn't tell anything was wrong with him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, Angolans are a little they're a little finicky. They're
they're
not
they're an odd species. I was gonna, if birds weren't such a pain to feed, I was thinking about maybe keeping them more on a bird diet, but I just didn't feel like having to keep offering birds. Birds are kind of one of those I just feed every so often if I have them. I don't usually feed
yeah.
them The only species I'll feed semi-regularly on birds is more my black-headed pythons. I'll feed them more birds than I will mammals. But other than that, I try the Angolans. I've been keeping on rats. And
Yeah.
there's a powder I've been using. I was told about that people were using for emeralds, and then people were using for just animals that might have had a regurg issue. Because I had a ball python just this past year. She laid a clutch of eggs, and she was a tiny female. She's so small. After she laid, she weighed 560 grams. That's how small she
Whoa.
is. That's how small she was. But even if you doubled that weight, it means she was under 1,100 grams, or just about 1,100 grams when she ovulated and laid a clutch of
Damn.
whopping 4 eggs.
Yeah.
And she was having regurg issues. Like she was big enough to eat a small rat, but she wouldn't hold. She couldn't even hold down a small adult. Not a small. It was like a medium adult mouse. So I was trying to figure out what I could do, and there's a few things I heard about people doing. One was from a healthier snake, mixing in water and poop and
Hmm.
helping the gut biome with it. Well, someone was telling me about this powder. It's I'd have to send you a link to it. I can't remember its name, but it's
Is it on Walmart? Because Warren Booth recommended that to me for my boas.
it's a I got it through Amazon is where I got mine from. I think it's a reptile. It's a reptile. What's the Zilla or the maybe it's
Is it
Zilla?
like Reptibac or something like that, or like
Yeah, something.
it's a probiotic for snakes, right?
Bio. Yeah, it's something like that. And I just dusted the rodents, and it honestly seemed like it did pretty well. I mean, the only issue I still had one Angolan regurg after it, but the only reason I think he did that was because my dumbass decided to feed him 2 mice instead of one. And this is after he was having this regurging issue. So I'm waiting a couple weeks, and I'll offer him just one dusted mouse, and then I'll kind of build him up from there. But now I got that ball python that was eating regurging those small adult mice. Now she's holding down small rats. So clearly it definitely does help.
Yeah. Well, Warren told me too to make an incision down the back of the feeder, so that way the acid could get inside the body easier without having to go through the skin and the fur,
Right. Right.
which is like harder to digest.
Right. Well, I would do that, but it's hard to do with live rodents.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the only reason I haven't done that. But I think I've heard of people using that method. So I did that powder too. I did it with a rough scale python, but she didn't have a regurg issue. So she has a constipation issue where she doesn't
Huh.
seem to poop that often, which isn't that necessarily normal for at least Morelia in general. The other than maybe green pythons. So I was like, shoot, because you want to hear something funny? I made a post about it a while ago. So I had this rough scale python in a cage, and she just never acclimated to the cage, and the most she'd ever would do would kill and leave the rodent. She would never actually eat it. And she did this for like 9 months, and I got so frustrated. I said, "All right, screw it." Threw her in a CB70 where she was prior to getting moved to that cage, and she went right back on eating. Right? And
Hmm.
she was vigorous. Well, she all of a sudden I noticed, and this seems, you know, cancer with Morelia seems to go hand in hand, and I'm talking from carpet pythons, the scrub pythons, the green pythons. For whatever reason, cancer seems to be a prevalent thing, and for whatever reason, who knows? It's probably the same reason why Nido is such a prevalent thing in Morelia or in the boreal snakes than it is in terrestrial snakes for whatever reason. So she her back end started to swell. the rough scale python, and it swelled, and it was getting pretty good size. And I go, shit, she must have cancer, because I've seen carpet pythons with the same situation. And I,
Mm.
in my head, I go, well, she's probably gonna. I'm not gonna lie, she's gonna be destined to die, essentially. Well, one day, and this was over the course of maybe a couple months, maybe even 3 to 4 months, and all of a sudden her back end started deflating a little bit, and I'm like, huh? I'm not seeing poop. Maybe she was peeing and I just didn't notice it or something, and or it was gas. It could have just been gas for all I know. But it started deflating, and then all of a sudden she just had this giant turd just, and it was like it was a gross. It was one of those gross turds too, where it was like you could tell it was a turd, but then it almost looked like it wasn't quite digested. If that
Mm.
makes sense, it was kind of odd. And I'm like, damn. I go, mate. I go, I guess she was just constipated. So I used that gut biome stuff on her to see if it would help with digestion and then help with the poop. And if that doesn't help, I heard of the other method is that mixing like I have a male Ruskill that does perfectly fine. Using some of his fecal matter, mix it with water, and then injecting it into her stomach to
Wow.
help with digestion, to help with because I heard ball python guy had this problem with a ball python, and he contacted a vet that works with a lot of people with big collections, um, and he was telling him take some poop from a healthy animal, mix it with water, and inject it into that snake's stomach to help with the gut biome and or the rebuild gut biome. And I was like, I haven't I haven't had to do that yet, but I might end up trying it with maybe that rough scale if she doesn't pass that poop this time.
Yeah.
So, but I'm just like, oh, thank God it wasn't cancer.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all I was relieved. I was like, oh, geez.
Dude, I just talked to Justin Julander about this. I took my Papuan carpet and moved him from a tub into a 4x2x2, and he like perched up in there, right? And then at night though, he was cruising. The first 2 days he was in there, he had like 3 bowel movements just
Yeah,
from moving.
right.
Like that, like that's how backed up he was from being in the tub. Like he wasn't, that's the only thing I can figure is that it was just the movement. Like all of a sudden it was like, I went in there the first day and I'm like, oh, all right, he pooped. Cool. Clean it up. And then like the next day I went in there and I smell it again and I'm like, what the hell? And I found another one and then another one.
Yeah,
So it must just be from him being able to move around now and
right.
climb and, go through
Well,
the branches.
I know Ryan Young would talk about this with green pythons, where he would people were feeding. This is back when the green python situation. People were feeding them too much, getting them too big, and they would get backed up and constipated. And I think what Ryan was saying though too, he was like, just you can even get them out and handling in them. If they're a reasonable animal, if you get them out and handle them, just them
Hmm.
moving, just that movement can help with their um, moving getting stuff released from their bowels. And with green pythons, it was, I think the other problem was people were keeping them so hot that they would sit in one corner of the cage and never move because the cage was
Mm,
so hot. They didn't want anything to do with that hot spot. But
yeah.
when Ryan said once you shut that heat off and keep them more in a cooler temp, they would move around more, cruise more, and then they would, it would help work out a lot of that stuff out of their system. So yeah, I
Yeah.
have heard of that. I think it's hard to say. I know what you're talking about though, but I think this might be more of a gut biome situation than a
Yeah.
constipation. Well, like constipation as far as like just from being inactive. I
Yeah.
think. I mean, I definitely want to get her in a cage though. She's such a cool. I love rough scale pythons, man. They're such a neat python, but I just I the problem is the cage I was putting her in wasn't big enough for me to just slide that CB70 in and let her choose. Like the whole Dylan. I think Dylan is where I heard this from, and I was like, that's an ingenious way to get a snake accustomed to from a tub to a cage. But the
Yeah.
cage, this sounds bad, but the cage was real tall. It wasn't necessarily wide, so I couldn't get the CB70 in there straight. it would be up and crooked, so the snake probably wouldn't want to sit in the tub anyways. So I couldn't sit it flush. So, but that was originally the goal, was to have them in a flush cage so she can choose, and then whenever she decided to stay out of the tub and stay into the enclosure, keep her in the enclosure and then take the tub out. But
Yeah.
the problem is I just took her and just threw her right into that cage, and just
Mm.
I didn't. There was no, and she was like, she didn't like that. Apparently, she was all angry. She would actually try to bite me in the cage. She just was not happy about
Wow.
being just thrown to the wolves like that. I guess, if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
will. But I mean, they. I definitely. I definitely think every animal's different. You got to learn to, if, I'm not saying like, I think you got to learn to acclimate animals better to enclosures or differently. Cause like my carpets, like I had a lot of them in tubs. And when I threw them in the cages, they didn't skip a beat. It didn't even phase
Yeah.
most of them, or any of them. Honestly, some of them got better. But the rough scale, for what I think, it's because too, a lot of rough scales seem to be really high strung animals. Even my male, who was a little more outgoing, he was a little hesitant to eat for a while. Now he's right back on, how he was prior. And the female is too. She's just fine. But again, I
Yeah.
really do want to get them in cages. So I really do. So I'm going to work on getting them something set up to where I can get them put back in the cages.
That's going to be the way I do my blood pythons for sure, where I'm going to take their tub and put it inside the enclosure. That way they can kind of come out at their own pace. I'll probably just
Right.
put like a cover on top of the tub and leave like a 4 or 5 inch gap. And if they want to come out and cruise, go for it. If they're not about it, then stay in the tub until you're ready.
Yeah. So like
But I don't.
I did this method with the retics, right? They went from big boa tubs to those cages, and I guess I could. The cages are pretty damn big. I could have just put the whole tub in there, but retics are pretty tough animals. So all I did was I took their hides they had in the tubs, and it's I don't like scrub things down super clean because I generally like them to have their own scent, unless it's like absolutely disgusting. If it's disgusting, I
Yeah.
clean it. But I generally leave a lot of their, some of their scent trails and a little bit of poop smeared on their hides, and because they tend to like their own scent. So I took their hides and I threw their hides into the cages and then threw them into their cage. So, and you could tell it took them a while, but they would hide into their hide. And when they came out, they would come out. But once I came into the room, a lot of the females the two females would just cruise right back into their hide where they
Huh.
felt comfortable. So I'm going to give them a little while, and then I'm getting these hides made where I think I've talked to you about them before, but it's like a method I'm trying to use, especially for the more aggro big snakes, where it's a shut-off door hide,
Yeah.
where it's a completely enclosed hide. So I can take the whole hide out with the animal in it, where it's a closed-off door, but you can access the top of it, so you can still get the animal out if you want to. So I'm trying to work on. I'm getting something made to where I can do that with them, and then try to see how that works with them. Because eventually, all those hides will be for almost anything that big enough to go into that room. Because some of like those Indians and Sri Lankans, I know they just do not like being messed with most of the time.
Yeah.
So if I can do it to where I never actually really need to touch them, unless it's for a medical reason, or if I'm lucky enough to get a clutch from them, have to put my hands on them. Otherwise, I try to be as hands off as I can with them because I don't know. I got to get them used to me being in the room first. So, and because even
Just you existing.
yeah, me existing around them, and I think those hides will help. And I know the hides do help because I feel bad when I see people keep these big constrictors in just a plain big cage, and they have to
Yeah.
see you. There's nowhere for them to go.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, I like having some sort of hide in there for them so they can at least get away. Because those two big retics, I mean, as soon as they saw me, that female went from climbing up on the perches just right back into her hide. I mean, it wasn't even a hesitation. It was one smooth right into her hide. She didn't want me seeing her or anything. So
Yeah.
unless they're hungry. Once they're hungry, it's different. Then they don't give a shit if I'm in the room or not.
Yeah. I got a bunch of those fake palms from where the hell was it? Hobby Lobby, and I made plaster of Paris bases for them.
Right.
And I put those in for my Argentine boa. And dude, she loves those. I mean, she can go behind those. It's a 6 foot cage, 6 by 2 by 2. She can go behind those, and you'd have no idea there was anything in there, you know. And sometimes she'll just
Right.
stick her head out. So that's got to be good for them, you know.
Right.
Like she's choosing to go under that coverage, you know. And
Right.
I feel like I'm more observing a natural behavior that way, you know,
Right.
compared to, yeah, it's sad when you see like a big snake just like laying on a roll of paper and that's all they have, you know,
Right.
a water
Yeah.
bowl and paper.
Yeah, because
It's,
you can tell like they'll especially the retics, man. Those retics will, I mean, they will utilize everything. I
yeah,
mean, they just they'll I'll see them climb up on the perch. They'll kind of cruise around them. They don't really I guess they don't really perch on the perches, but they'll kind of cruise over them and then kind of. They're just all over the place. But then when they're done, they just go right back into their hide, so they don't feel exposed and vulnerable.
yeah,
Especially since the whole front's open glass, so they can see everything out in front of them. So yeah, I
yeah.
just feel bad for them. The only and then I know the Rocks and the Indians are gonna and the Sri Lankans are gonna be like that too, where they probably I honestly bet they probably will almost never leave the hide unless they know I'm not nearby, because I don't think they want anything. Maybe the rock python. The rock python is like she's pretty reclusive, but when she's out, she's waiting. She knows something. She was the one snake that anytime I walked past the glass, she would just boom. She would hit it because she'd assume, oh, food. So
Yeah,
she's definitely not the snake you would want to turn your back to if she was out in the open, because I
yeah.
think she would try to maybe try to sneak a taste on you if she could. But
You mentioned before the doing the building and everything and kind of losing the not being able to do the things you want to do like herping. Do you have any trips planned, or is
I
that on the
did
back burner?
at first. It's still I guess kind of on the back burner because we don't I don't know much about it yet. But I was asking. I saw Daniel Solis put up on his Jungle Diary, his other business page. He posted an Indonesian trip to Komodo, Bali and Komodo, which is what I did the last time I went with him. Is a Bali and Komodo trip again. And I messaged him. I go, hey, do you have any plans to do any other Indonesian trips other than the Komodo Bali stuff? And he said, yeah, man, if you think you want to tag along, I'm trying to plan a trip for New Guinea or Papua. And
Ooh,
I go, you damn straight, I'd be interested in that. He said it'd only be for 7 days. And I go, perfect. I mean, because a Komodo trip's like 2 weeks. I mean, you're gone. So Papua, he said it, or yeah, Papua, he said it'd just be 7 days, 8 nights, or something like that. I said, perfect. Just long enough to where I feel comfortable leaving everything. Usually week trips, or whole week trips are usually the best if I'm going to be gone for like a overseas trip. Because once you start
yeah.
getting into like, man, I would hear Ryan, and I don't know if Nick would tell us stories of this, but Ryan definitely he'd say he'd go to Australia for a month. I go, do you have someone who you trust watching your snakes for that long? I go, that's wild. I go, especially some of the wild stuff he keeps. I'm like, Jesus. I go, your wife's willing to watch those white lips and all that for that long? I don't know. I was like, I feel bad leaving my dad having to watch and water the rings and white lips and stuff.
They both have
So
kids.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, I got a nephew, but he's still a little young. I don't think I trust him with the white lips and all
How
that
old is he?
stuff. 9.
Oh yeah, that's too young. That's like
Yeah,
my son's age. My son trusts everything. He thinks that
yeah,
all the animals love him,
yeah.
and it's like, no, dude.
Right. Well, dude, hey, you want to hear something even worse? So, I remember my younger brother. He's 27 or something. He hasn't been he at the time. I think he wasn't or hasn't been in the new building yet. So he brought his wife, and then my nephew came, and they uh, they came without me being in here. and they came in because all of my lights are on timers, so they go off at 8, and they came in right at 8, so the lights just shut off. And I tell them that's probably the worst time you can go in and mess with stuff because I usually feed everything at night for the most part.
Yeah.
And boy, he instead of the ball python room, which most things in there are pretty chill, even the short tails, as long as you don't go in and actually put your hand in there, they usually won't bother you. No, he goes into the miscellaneous room where the retics, the carpets, the white lips, the liasis, and all that is in. And he opens up the mainland retic tub, the big boa tubs when they were a little smaller, and he opens it up, and they're like right at face level. And I had to go. I was like, "Oh my God, you got so lucky!" Because he said the retic come rushing up to the front, like towards his face. I said, "You're lucky you didn't get bit in the face," because I said your wife and the nephew would have ran right out of that room, left you, and then you better hope I would have came down in time to try to pull it off your face.
Yeah.
And I was
dude, yeah. Could you imagine getting bit and wrapped on your face?
Oh man, I told him, I mean, it probably wouldn't have strangled him, but man, I mean, at the time they were probably 7, 8 foot long at the time, so they were decent sized. And I'm just like, that would not have felt good. And I go, he was a wrestler too. And I go, you're already pretty ugly. I don't think you need to make that face any worse. So I was like, what's with the common sense, Daniel? I go, it's like, you're just going to just open up shit without me being here. And I was just like, that's why the big snake room is always locked unless I'm in here. That's all the rooms can be locked, but that room in particular is always left locked, along with the cages are all locked. So there is no, in case someone decides they want to be a curious George and try to go in and mess with stuff without permission or something.
What is the dimensions of that building that you have?
What was it? 50 by 50.
Oh, that's nice.
And then so it's 2,500 square feet, I think. And the rodents, what is it? 500 square foot is a small workshop. And then the rest of the 30-foot hallway of it is rodents. And then the 2,000 square foot of it is snake stuff.
Nice.
For the most part.
Is that on a slab or does it have a crawl space?
Slab.
Nice.
Yeah, we were thinking about the crawl space, but it was like, I don't know. I'm not big on that layout personally.
Yeah, no. Yeah, like if I want to have mine set up as a gym too, I need it to be a slab. I'm not going to lift on some wooden floor that I'm going to fall through.
No, well, and then that was another reason too. If we get those custom cages built, I don't know how much those are going to weigh. They could. Gosh, who knows? They could weigh about as much as a small car, and
you don't want to be on a slab.
You don't want to, risk anything like that. So that was another reason. I was never. I guess if you wanted to live in it, or essentially a house, and you kept all the snakes in the bottom, and you lived up top or something. But I wanted as much snake room as humanly possible. Yeah. Like I see a lot of the ball python guys will have which is smart, especially if they can make that space work. But you get like a little snake room, and then you get all this other room that's like office and who knows what else. Like a bay door. Like I don't have a bay door or anything in this area, so we just double doors as much as I was willing to go because a bay door would just bring in a lot of draft and take up a lot of space. So
exactly,
I was like, I'd rather have 2 double doors, and that's good enough. I can just carry shit in if I have to. We just back.
I think I'll do a bay door on the front, so when I lift, I can open that up.
Right.
Well,
it's a little easier for you because you don't suffer from as extreme weather as we do.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's not that bad. I mean, our summers are hot and humid, yes, but they're not that hot. They're not like we went to Washington and it was like 105 degrees when we went to Spokane. It's disgusting. I messaged Nick and I'm like, dude, it feels like a hairdryer. Like it's just hot and dry.
Yeah.
So it's I have no interest in like we get in the 90s, you know, but not even like the high 90s, you know, but it's humid. So it can be nasty.
I think that's why this humidity just makes it seem worse
100%.
compared to like when you go to like Arizona or New Mexico and it's like 110 or 15 degrees and dry as shit and, you know, super hot or something. Different kind of
I mean, I learned that from my sauna, just how important humidity is for making you suffer. Is like if I get in my sauna and it's 200 degrees and like 15% humidity, it's not that bad. But when you dump some of that water on the stones and it goes up briefly to like 20% humidity, it feels like you're being boiled alive. It's crazy.
Oh yeah. No, well, these reptile rooms, like when they get to the peak of humidity, like as high as it usually gets, is around 80. It'll get really close to 90%.
That's crazy.
Really close. But usually it fluctuates from 70 to 80, and then sometimes like it'll stay humid at night, but then once the space heaters kick on and the heat comes back on during the day or in the morning, the humidity will drop a bit. It'll drop almost to 50% roughly, 50 something percent or so. So they'll get and I noticed like it's weird too. Like some of the snakes will react towards that. Like when it gets dry like that, they'll start courting more. It's like it's almost like either the temperature drop does it or the humidity drop will do it. At least cause more of an interest in breeding and some stuff. Like Darwin's, I noticed my Darwin's bred better whenever the humidity was real low, and it helped when it was cold. But the humidity seemed to trigger them quite a bit compared to whenever it was cold but humid. It's always weird to explain to people. I go cold humidity where it's just sticky. It's not that it's hot, but it's just sticky. Those rooms will get like that too, where it'll just feel sticky in there.
Yeah, that's Florida.
Yeah, no, exactly. That was Indonesia too. I would gun temperatures and get an idea, and it would be like 74 degrees, but it'd be like 88% humidity or something like that. So it'd be real sticky, but cool at the same time, or kind of cool. So definitely. I can feel you there with the humidity, but I can go in. Well, I guess you can go in and out. You keep going to your house, you know?
Yeah. Our house is 50% humidity pretty much all the time.
Yeah. You keep it cool in there too?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure. I know some people absolutely hate the cold, so they keep their house like almost like 78, 80 degrees. I go, my God, that's fucking horrible. You live like that?
So during the day, our AC is at 78.
Oh my God, you monster.
But then at night it drops down to 70 so we can sleep, you know? Yeah. But it's not that bad. Like it rises up to 78 and then the AC runs to keep it at 78.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, so it's circulating, it's moving, it's keeping it a little drier.
Right.
But yeah, otherwise our power bill would be like insane, dude.
Right. Well, we got the at least on the snake building, we got the solar panels. So
nice.
It helps a bit with that. At least maybe not as much this time of year because it's a little more cloudy compared to obviously when it's summer and there's more sun out, but yeah.
Damn, that's a good idea. Like, especially with me being in Florida.
You would kill it out there with solar panels. You know, as long as you're not out in like the north. Isn't the Northwest considered more cloudy, I guess, less sun? So you might be more in trouble out there, I guess, compared to like you or even me, where most of the time we're pretty sunny. Even during winter, we still get plenty of sunny days, but you still get a number of mostly cloudy days during the winter.
Yeah, we get tons of sun. I mean, right now it's sunny and I think it's like 76 degrees outside. So that's the beauty of Florida.
Yeah, right. Beautiful state. The laws just suck. That's only issue.
I know. Yeah, it's crazy, and especially since we tout freedom and everything, and
right. And then you at least for a reptile guide, virtually none.
Yeah.
Well, at least the cool. I guess the stuff you seem to like. Yeah.
Well, that's my problem is I like everything. You know, I mean, I like all the snake. You and I are very similar in that we have very, very diverse collections. We have a ton of different stuff.
Right. It just keeps things interesting, man. Your mind's always occupied with something different. Like I like ball pythons, but if I kept everything in a rack or in a tub, it would just be boring. And
Yeah.
you're seeing it now in the reptile community. You're seeing a lot more ball python guys that originally got into it to make it into a business. Now that the market's slow, they're wanting to diversify and get into more stuff.
Yep.
So, but I tell people, I go, do it because you like it. Don't do it because it's a trend. Because by the
Yeah.
time, and this was something Ryan Young used to say years and years ago. I remember he would say, just because it's cool now doesn't mean it's going to be cool by the time those animals are reproducing. You
Yep.
know, they could be yesterday's news and be back to, dirt prices. So make sure you get it because you like it, not because you think you can make a different business avenue or a different, stream of income out of it. Obviously
Yeah.
you can, but don't go in it thinking that it's going to be the next boom, because it could be a bust by the time you're making anything from it.
Yeah,
So,
that's what Justin and I just talked about was keeping what you're passionate about,
right.
and I guess the only thing that I have that I am not like that I am not truly passionate about is
I
my
feel like
pair of ball pythons.
I had a feeling because you were telling me about it, and I remember you were telling me about them, and I go, oh
I
god,
told you could have them for free and you said no.
dude, I have so many. My only thing is I have like 30 females that I kind of really need to move because I just don't. I just have so many of them, and I'm not
That is
necessarily
bananas.
breeding. I'm not breeding them. Just I'm always bad about keeping because I generally do enjoy my ball python. I got some that I don't think I still have my first albino ball python in there, and I'll never sell her and I'll never get rid of her because the market thinks they're useless, but I still think
Yeah.
they're cool because I am a sucker for albinos. I've always she was my first snake, and I've always had a soft spot for the albino stuff. So that's why I got albino carpets, albino berms. I got head albino olives, but eventually I'd like to get albino olives. But then virtually any species I like that I can get albino in, I generally gravitate to it.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean I got my spot nose clown because I think she's a beautiful snake. And then I want it. Then I've always liked the Batman
right,
morph. I
right.
think that's a beautiful snake as well. And I thought, let me just make my own Batman, right? Just as like a fun project. And then it was I had reached out to Canova and they were like, "Oh, well, you could get this and make a Pompeii, which is really nice." And I'm
Right.
like, "All right, sold." And
So yeah.
it's
So so what is your enclosure size for your ball pythons, and what does it look like? Does it look like a lot of your other ones?
yeah, yeah. The female's in a 4x2x2. The male is still in a tub.
Okay. And out of curiosity, how active is that female in the cage that you
Uh,
notice?
Fairly active. I mean, she actually goes up into the branches and stuff and cruises
Okay.
around.
How often does she
But
hide? Does she hide quite a bit still, or
oh yeah, dude, like all the
so?
time.
So I have a suggestion. I think you would be the guy to do it too, especially with your creative mind when it comes to this. But I always told people, what you should do to keep ball pythons. I think would be a really awesome setup. Is it would have to be an arboreal size cage because of what you'd end up having to do. But if you could make a setup to where you had like a burrow system that you had up against the glass, that you can visually see the burrow system, kind of like an ant colony, but
Hmm.
obviously a huge scale, big enough for an adult female ball python to be able to fit in. But you can
Yeah,
see her in the burrow system and make it deep enough to where she can retreat back to where, maybe you might have to set up red LED lights in it to be able to see her in there. But I think
yeah,
that would be super duper cool. And then you still have a whole top layer to where she could still come out, climb, do whatever she's doing above ground. But then she has somewhere to retreat during the day, but you could still see her.
So make like a false floor, basically.
Yeah, essentially. And you can maybe add substrate along in it, like maybe make it to where the burrow system's just like a small part and then substrate all around it.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to make like some gigantic burrow system. You can make like maybe a smaller version of it, but it's still, I don't know, visually appealing. So I think maybe having something where you can even access the front of it. So wherever the false wall is for the burrow, you can still pull her out if you had to get her. You don't have to wait for her to actually come out or destroy the whole setup. You can still access the front of it.
So instead of getting rid of my ball pythons, you think I should
Be
double
more
down
creative.
and put more money and space into them?
Yeah, there you go. Make it more interesting. I think it'd be cool. I've been debating about it. Like there was like even for like a breeding setup, I always thought Justin Julander, matter of fact, I don't know if he still has these setups, but I always wondered, especially with people who keep and breed ball pythons on a smaller scale, is a cage setup to where you have a cage but a rack system underneath that has a tube connecting the two, so the snake can still go into the tub if it wanted to, the burrow essentially, and then explore the top half of the cage. And I always thought, I never got why that was never a big thing in the ball python community. Like I've seen, and Justin did it a lot with the carpet pythons, and I even think some Antaresia he did it for too. But his setup, I've seen people do it with like indigos and even Boland's python setups to where they had that. But I never got why ball python people never, especially when we were in that transition where I remember Dave and Tracy Barker had the big boa tubs with the plexiglass front. Like ARS or Freedom Breeder tubs, they would have ball pythons in those. And then what most people keep ball pythons in now was like the lay box.
Yeah.
So, and then it's progressively become that lay box size. So
it's because ball python people want to breed more ball pythons and need to maximize space. That's why. I mean,
it's true. It's definitely true. They do that, but it's one of those like, especially if you're a small timekeeper and you want to purposely like keep your collection small. I just never got why you wouldn't want to have them in some sort of setup where you can actually see them, because it just keeps it. Because I see a lot of those particular people will get into it, keep it in the exact same way a big breeder will keep it, and then they get bored and then they don't like it anymore and then they go to move it on. Well, of course you got bored. You had your 5 or 10 snakes in a fucking rack system you couldn't see anything in. And the only way you had to interact was the 5 minutes it took to clean everything, and that was all you ever got to do. Compared to like,
and you didn't enjoy any of it because you have to get to your 29 or 30 or 40 other snakes, in the same day.
Exactly. So I never. There are a few. I'm starting to see more ball python people keeping like small collections, but they keep them in cages. So I think it's definitely starting to become some sort of a thing. So I always in my head, I always looked at ball python community when it comes to progressing in the hobby, is we always talk about how in their mind they're progressing the fastest, but compared to what we as other species keepers, we look at it as they're probably the slowest to do it. They seem to do it, but they do it a lot slower.
Yeah.
Because they're more focused on like the business aspect of it than more of like either the aesthetics or the well-being of the animal, I guess, as bad as that might sound. But
or the passion for the animal.
Passion, yeah, that's probably a better way of putting it. It's just more about the business aspect of it, which I don't have obviously a problem against, but it's just trying to blend the two, I think, is important. Otherwise, then it just becomes all of one, and then you just don't enjoy the hobby or what got you interested in it to begin with. You know? I still get snakes out. Like, I'll get a ball python out and look at it because I just enjoy looking at it or interacting with it, not just cleaning and just putting it away and moving on to the next one. And that goes for all the species too. There's just species I enjoy getting out and looking at, because you admire that species for what it looks like.
Yeah, shit. I mean, I just like opening up my Argentine boa's cage and letting her come out and move around the room and, I mean, but she is so chill, dude. She is, so like my son can take her to the couch and hang out with her, and she's like a pet. I don't even know if I want to breed her. Like, I think about that sometimes. Like, what if I go to breed her and she dies?
Right.
Like that would be a nightmare.
Right. Well, there's that, or she becomes an asshole. I've heard of that too. Maybe not so much with boas, but with pythons, where you breed them once, you pull the female off her clutch, and she like has this grudge against you for the rest. Like I've heard of it with retics actually quite a bit, where they go from being a super mellow snake, then you breed her, then she has a clutch, you take that clutch away, and it's like she never forgives you after that.
Wow.
So at least that's I've heard of it. I've never personally experienced it with at least a bigger snake. It's probably different with a bigger snake compared to a smaller snake, where a bite's a lot less severe than a bigger one. So
Yeah.
but it's funny you say that about your Argentines. I got some Pearl Island boas, and they're the polar opposite. They're absolutely evil.
What are you doing to your snakes over there, dude?
I don't know, just not messing with them, and just I think it might have to do with I just don't feed them that regularly, so they're almost always hungry.
Yeah.
Like, even my annulateds, like my annulateds are dubbed as one of the nicest out of the Corrales complex. Like it's rare to get them to bite you. Sometimes that can be the frustrating part, is getting them to eat because they're so mellow. And they were fine in quarantine, and when I moved them out to the building, well, at least one female, she just turned into a monster. She would try to bite me whenever I would just pop my head in to look at her. And I was like, wow, what happened to this nice, mellow, annulated tree boa I was sold on from years of listening to like people talk about the annulateds. But
Yeah.
no, they're cool. I like boas. I can only have so many boas.
Yeah.
I still want to get some more red. I want to, not more because I don't have any, but I want to get some red annulated tree boas. I only got the dark phase right now.
That's what I like so much about the Argentines, is how different they are from all the other boas.
Yeah.
They're just so different, you know.
They're impressive for sure. I was thinking about picking up some Argentines. It was between Argentines and the Pearl Island stuff. I was looking at the Sabugue. I was like, man, they're both pretty cool. They think they're both neat looking, but the Argentines just get bigger, and I'm just like, ah. And they were more pricey too, for because they're when I think of Argentines, I don't know why, but to me they give me they're like the diamond pythons of the boas, at least
I
in
think
my
that
mind.
too.
But
are you saying like from like their perspective of kind of coming from a cooler environment
cooler climate? But in my head also, I look at them as like a pinnacle boa, even though I think maybe more of like your Amarelli and stuff might be considered more of that, or the true red tail stuff might be looked at as more as like the pinnacle of boas. Because I remember at one point the Argentines were like virtually dirt cheap. I mean, it was like hard to give them away. And at some point now they've gone the total opposite end, and now they're like relatively hard to, well, maybe not hard to get, but they're a lot more sought after, it seems.
Brian Vilmeno, he had great prices on his. He was selling them for I think $700 or $800 a piece, and then he had like some sale go on where they were like 20% off. So they were ridiculously cheap.
Well, you shouldn't have been telling you. Don't be telling me that.
Yeah, you should have jumped on that, because they were. I think they were 50% Max Pink line too.
So I have a question for you, because I've never looked too much into the Argentine care stuff. Really, do they suffer from the same thing like diamond python syndrome, where if you kept them in a warmer environment their whole life, they would degrade and go downhill faster?
I'll let you know. I mean, mine's doing great.
Okay. Well, I'm curious if you ever heard anyone.
I've never heard anything about that.
Okay. Well, I
know
it was a thing in diamond pythons, and they do. I don't know if they get nearly as cool as diamond pythons in their environment, but I just was curious if maybe they might suffer from that same kind of issue or not.
From talking with Travis Johnson of Living Legless, he keeps his we talked about, I think we talked privately about the environment that they come from, and they come from an environment that gets really hot and it gets pretty damn cold too.
Yeah.
So during the summer it gets pretty dry, and also the terrain that they come from, there can be like scrub, dry, arid kind of desert areas, and then there's more more forested areas, and so they I think that they're probably a really forgiving boa. Like they could probably take a lot of
So
swings, and
they kind of sound more like Brettles pythons, kind of.
yeah, I think so.
More arid areas compared to like I don't know, like diamonds seem to be more similar. Their environment seems a bit more similar to, not quite as extreme, but it seems almost a little more similar to like a Boland's environment, as
Yeah.
far as like more tropical, but just experiences cooler temps.
But even the diamonds get pretty damn hot during their summer months,
Yeah, yeah.
Or I guess it wouldn't be summer, right? Because summer is cold there. They're winter months.
Well, they could still get they're probably more similar. It sounds like they're more similar to like us, where we could have warmer days, but then we could still have like, I think Ryan said they could have 100 and, well, they can get like 100+ degree days, but then get 60 degrees at night still.
Yeah.
Those, so I think that's what they experience. They can get warm days, but then get fairly cool nights.
Well, yeah. I mean, talking to Jason Patterson, who lives in an area where there are diamond pythons. He said that they get ice and frost and below freezing temperatures,
right,
where he's at.
Damn.
So, yeah, I mean, or at least right at freezing, But like he said, they're not going to be sitting out in the open air. They're going to be hunkered down under a log or something like that. You know.
Yep. I've seen plenty of pictures of that. Them clogged up into a log or something like that, or under brush, stuff like that.
Dude, they're so cool. Or you see them hanging from a bird feeder, and they're so awesome. And you see giant carpets over there, and that are getting pulled out of people's attics and everything. There's so many. I love carpet pythons, dude. And these diamonds that I got from Brandon, they're growing like weeds, dude. Like they're growing so fast, it's nuts.
Really? In comparison to like your jungles and your
yes,
your poplar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're getting thick. Like they're like, it's just like very obvious that they're growing compared to, well, no, that the pop one, he grew really fast too. I told Riley that it was like every time I turned around and looked at him, it was like he grew, even like without feeding him. But compared to the jungles, yeah, man, they seem like they're growing like maybe 20-25% faster.
Damn. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's impressive. Yeah, you get those certain speed, like I was telling you with those retics, man. It seemed like their bodies would just elevate. Like it's like a video game. It would just like the Mario when he'd hit the box and he'd just grow. That's kind of that's the vibe I was getting when I was feeding those retics. Like I gave him those big rabbits the other day, and immediately put the ghost female into a shed, and you could just tell she's like really. They utilize it towards growth really, really quick.
Yeah,
compared to most.
Yeah, you need to get Argentine boas just to wrap that conversation up.
Maybe eventually we'll see. I'm debating. I went to my buddy Dave's place to help him move, and he does a lot of boas, and he does a lot of the boa morph stuff, so like the crosses and all that. But I'm like, Jesus Christ, some of these morphs they're just unreal. They're like everything a ball python guy wishes their ball pythons would look like as adults. I mean, dude, like I'm talking like pink. I mean, they would have like pink boas, like orange boas, red boas.
And they don't brown out.
Oh, yeah. Like I'm talking like adult female, like breeding females that were just vibrant red. Like one of them looked like fire. Like oranges, yellows, and reds just bursting up. It looked like the boas on fire. I mean, it was the only way to describe it. And it's funny how jaded people get when they're in like a sector of the hobby, and then someone who knows about them, but is either or doesn't know about them or knows very little about them or doesn't dabble with them, it gets introduced to them, and you're just like, how is this not the coolest thing on earth? Like, how is this not like more popular? Because he'll look at it and be like, oh, it's pretty cool. And I'm just like, it's like he's even dabbling. He's like, yeah, I think I might breed her and then get rid of her, sell her or something. And I'm like, dude, this thing is phenomenal. This thing is just, it's not even real. It's just so pretty. So I think it's just funny the perspective people have when especially when it comes to morph stuff. Morphs really seem to be the ones that really it's cool, and then you get jaded by it, and you want to move on to the next thing and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So yeah.
I have a IMG Motley, and that guy gets crazier looking every time he sheds.
Oh yeah, my buddy had a lot of that IMG VPI stuff, and that stuff was like black with lavenders coming through, and
Yeah.
some of them would have like red still peeking through, and I'm like, this just doesn't even look real. Like
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going in my head like, how are these not more popular and stuff? And I'm just like, it just boggles my mind. So, well, how many boas do you have? You just have the few Argentines and the IMG, or do you got
I
more?
have I have 1.2 Argentines and I have 1.1 Boa Imperator.
Okay. So how were the boas? Were they? How would you compare their personality to not retic, your carpets?
Which ones? The Argentines or the Imperators?
Both of them with the carpets, all the
The
carpets.
Imperators are like couch potatoes, dude. Like they are totally. I can go in there and like boop them on the top of the head and they don't care. Like there's whatever wild animal was in that animal has been bred out of them probably 20 or 30 years ago. Like they're so
Okay.
laid back, it's not even funny. The Argentine, dude, she's got a lot of personality. She's always moving around in her cage. It's very rare that she's in one spot.
Right.
So she always wants out. And then once she's out, she's curious as hell. So, I mean, she kind of reminds me of like uh, a really chill carpet python in
Okay.
that she's just very curious about her environment like carpets are, but more slow moving. But if I open that cage up, she knows like it's like I'm coming out now and I'm gonna cruise around, I'm gonna check things out. The babies, you know, they gape their mouth and they hiss and you know they'll snap at
Right.
you, and so I kind of like that. You know, I like that they've got a little bit more feist to them.
Right.
But they're super cool, and then the color change that the Argentines go through as well is
Okay.
awesome.
So they weren't very huffy or striky or striking like a younger carpet when they were babies. I mean, when they were
The Argentines,
both of them, the Imperator and the Argentines, were they
my
striky as babies
Imperators,
or
no,
huffy?
they've been
Really
puppies since I got them. Yeah.
interesting.
And then my Argentines though, the Occidentalis, they're little savages. Like I need to distract them with one hand and scoop them
Okay.
up with the other. Like I don't know if it's a food drive, but just like my big female, they are very curious. So if you're going into their tub, they want to know what you're doing there.
Hmm.
And then they'll either get pissed that you're there or they'll bite at just, you know, bite because they think you're food.
Okay. Well, I was just curious because my buddy Dave, like I said, he's a big boa guy. He likes all the boas and stuff, and I'm obviously the python guy. And I was categorizing like sectors of the hobby, like you have the big five being the ball pythons, the corn snakes, the bearded dragons and leopard geckos, and maybe crested geckos can fall under there maybe. And then you had this ones right underneath it are animals that are somewhat known, gain popularity, but are like they'll never be mainstream like those other species. And I put like carpet pythons, blood pythons, boas. I even think superdwarf retics can fall into that with how popular they gotten over the last few years. And then lizards, I couldn't really think of lizards that fell under it because I just maybe some of the small Australian monitors and stuff like that, or something along, or in the ractodactylus, like your lychees and all them, I would say would fall under that category too. And he would get all defensive about it, and he's like, "Boas, boas aren't nearly as bad as the carpet pythons and blood pythons are." I go, "Are you kidding me?" I remember cleaning some of your baby boas, and they would just hiss with just the loudest hiss a little snake like that could ever hiss. Like the thing is with the carpets and bloods, they'll just bite you. The baby boas that were hissing would hiss at you and then bite you. And I'm just and like I don't know if you've ever heard a real big female boa hiss, but it's pretty and I don't know, intimidating is the right word, but you definitely pay attention to it when she does it.
Yeah.
It's loud compared to like any other species of snake I've heard. So I'm just
Yeah,
like,
my Argentine, she was in shed, and I went in and misted her enclosure, and I accidentally got a little on her, and that like set her off where she went like rigid and then just gaped her mouth and started hissing. And yeah, I would say it was intimidating. Like I didn't want to go and grab her,
oh yeah, yeah. So I'm like, come on, Dave. I go, people have that stigma with boas too. I don't think boas ever got over that stigma either, for whatever reason. I don't, retics. It's always because they're bitey and big. Carpets because they're always bitey. Blood pythons because they're bitey. And boas, I always would, it was because of bitey. And I think hissing might be a secondary thing with them because like I said, if you get a big female boa, it is a very impressive snake. Just not even size wise, but just their hiss. They can let out when they're pissed off.
I think that they socialize really easily though.
Easier.
I think that's the big difference is like the
Right.
emperor otters, like they just chill out so easily that like, if you're dealing with somebody's pet, like I think that they just get habituated to humans really
Right.
easily and quickly.
And it sounds like it's just primarily the Morse stuff. Maybe because it's a lot more generations. Because like
I think so.
my Pearl Islands are just fucking nuts. I mean,
Everything hates you though.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, but it's they're wild for sure. But I mean,
That's why you have ball pythons, because they're like the only things that love you.
yeah, I don't know about that. I get bit quite a bit by them too. I got a little wild collected normal female that's pretty. She's a firecracker. She's game on whenever you pop open that tub of hers.
That's funny.
The Nicaraguans, those were pretty spicy too. Those are one that bit or Nick or not Nick Dave had, and they were. I mean, they were the same way. It was game on as soon as that you either open that tub, they were just focused on you, huffing, or they just focus on you and then strike at you. So,
Yeah.
And then he showed me all his boas downstairs. He had his holdbacks, and every one of them, they had to be real dodgy when they pulled the water cup out because the boa would come flying out at their hand trying to bite them. And I'm like, you see what I mean? I don't know how these aren't. I mean, they're super. Don't get me wrong. They were, like I said, when it came to the ones I listed as far as species in that category, boas I think have the biggest potential to be a big contender as far as popularity because of, I mean, just how pretty they are.
Yeah.
I mean, it astounds me how pretty they are as far as the snake goes. I mean, I think they rival. Retics are pretty close. Them as babies to adults are really, really pretty. Carpets obviously are really pretty. Blood pythons can be really, really pretty. Even with all the morphs, they can be super pretty. But there's something about a boa. The boa colors are just, I don't know. They just sit better on a boa compared to pythons.
Well, and something cool about boas too is they seem to dodge all the legislation.
Yeah, isn't it weird? There was the one, like I said, there was that one law, the original Lacey Act, the one with the Burmese pythons. I remember when they had boas on the list. I remember Dave Levinson, buddy who's in the boas, sold all his boas because he was that scared. He thought he was going to get stuck with a bunch of boas. So it got really close to, they were on the discussion board to get put on the Lacey Act, and you can only imagine what kind of chaos that would have ensued if the boas would have gotten put onto that. Because I remember a lot of people were really, really afraid. I mean, just as much as the retics and the burn people were, with that. Yeah. So
well, and that was something that I think I had heard that they were going to have legislation against them in Florida, but they fought it because of what an industry it is.
Yeah. That's the reason why the retics were saved the first time around, because the impact on the industry it had is they looked at like how much each one of those sectors brought in, which is weird because I figured Burns would have, well, I guess because of the Everglades, they didn't really give a shit how much it made. Otherwise, because I figured berms would have been just as lucrative as the retics, but if the population obviously a lot larger with the berms, and well, I guess
Well,
the retics.
berms just aren't as popular either. I mean, like, they are super cool snakes. I'll look it up right now. How many berms do you think are on Morph Market?
Ooh, that's a hard one, honestly.
Yeah, it's
I don't think I've ever looked into that. Honestly, I
I've
wouldn't
I've
know.
noticed that it's a shockingly low number.
Interesting. I
224 animals.
Damn, that's like nothing compared to the
That's
retics.
literally nothing. That's
Retics
one
like
page of ball pythons.
I mean, yeah. I was gonna say, are the retics seven, five or 7,000? Because I thought last I heard there was a lot, but
Let me see here.
I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, just for funsies, let's look at ball pythons. 39,000.
A little bit better. At least they're not 50. They were getting up there for a while. It's still not great, but it's
Boa constrictors, 4,100.
no, that's not bad at all. Wow, thoroughly surprised with that one.
Pretty crazy, right? All right, here we go. Retics, 900.
Oh, okay, that's a lot lower than it was. I mean, it's still a lot for a big snake, but I swear, I think a couple of years ago they were like pushing around 5 or 6,000. I thought somewhere in there, which is ridiculous for a big snake. I
Yeah.
mean, that's just nuts. But yeah, I think the reason why though I wasn't when the Lasiac for the burns came up. That was around the time I was still really new. I wasn't really into the hobby, like the industry side of things. But I wouldn't doubt if Burns and retics are pretty close and neck and neck. But I think once a Lasiac had, obviously the Burns just died off. That industry just vanished overnight. But then
Yeah.
gave and then burn people. I think it's weird how the big snake community thinks they're like the big truck people. They're only in the big vehicles, like lifted trucks and all that. They would never be caught in a small,
Yeah.
bug or something like that. But
You're talking about basically the state of Florida.
yeah, essentially. Well, I live out in the country too. Trust me. There's a lot of those, truck people out here too. But I think all the burn people, they immediately hopped over to the retic. I remember years ago, Nick used to be, well, if people get out of the burns and the retics, what are they going to have to go to next? Obviously, smaller stuff. And I go, yeah, but burn and retic people are definitely like, if it ain't big, I don't care.
Yeah.
At least a lot of them I've talked to, they literally told me they just don't have the capacity to give a shit about anything under a certain amount of feet.
Yeah.
That's why they grow the baby so damn fast, and so they get them out of that like I don't give a shit stage, I guess, and then they get them monstrous size.
That's
So
wild.
yeah, that's why I what were we talking about? I lost my train of thought. We were talking about prior the berms, something about the berms, but I think
The legislation and how the industry there's a lot more people breeding retics, so it kind of saved them from legislation.
I think it saved and then the boas. Obviously, I think that's what saved the boas too. But who knows? I mean, it's hard to say with the boas. Boas are always going to be, especially. Did you ever see that video of the Australian relocator who was airlifted to the hospital because he had his artery lacerated by a carpet python?
No, that's wild.
There's a video. It's a YouTube video of it. Like he actually. So at first I called bullshit. I thought maybe it was a king horneye, and people just assumed it was just called it a carpet because they didn't know. So, but I watched the video, and the guy's out in the middle of the bush relocating this big male carpet, and he goes right before he releases it. He shows the camera. Well, the carpet got a hold of his wrist, and instinctively wanted to wrap. Well, it's not going to turn and move your big human body, so it just moved the snake. So the snake's mouth just rolled over his wrist, and slit his artery, like a major artery in his wrist, and he had to get. I mean, he got super lucky. He got airlifted to the hospital, and I'm just like, that immediately made me go, I could never imagine having an employee now, knowing that something like that could happen. and they don't know the animal, and
Yeah.
you just grabbed a hold of them because they thought they could trust it, or didn't know, and just same exact thing happens. It just cuts open their artery, or
Oh man, now you're scaring me because I have kids.
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure you're present when your kids are there.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
I
and
don't
if
know. Maybe we do need to legislate all these animals and nobody should
right,
have them. No.
right, right. Well, I mean, my only concern, like if kids are in here, I'm usually in here. There's never been any situation where a kid. The only thing that makes me nervous is when people want to come over to the collection, and I ask how many kids they're wanting to bring, and then they outnumber the adults, and I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, that gets a little dangerous because then we got to, you know, it's not 1-on-1 anymore, and then it's like 1-on-2, and we got to try to multitask, and I'm not very good at
Yeah.
multitasking, so I was,
No, I have cameras in my room, and my kids know that there are cameras, so they know that they're not going to get away with any nonsense of going in, without an adult,
right,
and they know that they can't bring friends in here and everything
right,
without being accompanied by an adult.
right. Yeah, no, that's always. I still got to do that. I haven't done that yet. Cameras are next.
Oh,
Cameras are
dude, they're
next.
so cheap.
Yeah,
They're like
there's
$25. I do the what brand are they? Not Govee. I use Govee for all the temperature stuff, Genie. I think it's Genie. They're like $20, so you can get them in like sets of 3, and they just plug into your wall and you're good to go.
okay. Interesting. Yeah, I like I said, that's been the next thing on the list is getting cameras for in here, just for
Put
safety
them all
reasons and
over.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
at least where I had to tell my dad one time because he was so inclined to tell people, yeah, if you contact my son, he'll let you come over and look at the building. I go, no, we got to know the people. You start inviting weird reptile people. That's how shit gets stolen, or whatever. Or like I said, it sounds like a horrible idea. I go, Nick, you got to vet these people. Yeah, because you got
Yeah.
to get to know them before you just invite them over to come look at a snake or look at snakes and stuff. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I'm
Well, that
less worried about non-snake people than I am with actual snake people. As
yeah.
far as looking at
Well,
stuff.
they could bring diseases, mites,
Yeah,
and
mites. Yep,
want to steal
yep,
your shit. Yeah.
yep. Or even if, well, I guess non-snake people might do this too, but it's more like even who it's may not even be so much them as much as people they tell because they're excited. Like, oh, you should go check out such and such who lives, over there or something, and then you're just
Yeah,
like,
he's got a female dwarf berm,
right,
and then all of a
yeah,
sudden it's like, oh wow, huh?
right, right. Yeah, yeah, that sounds like a horrible idea. Yeah, yeah.
Now you're thinking about somebody stealing your female dwarf berm.
Well, the way I look at it is like I was like, maybe because I don't have a bunch of crazy morph stuff, like it would be different if it was like a Justin Kobylka or something like that, or Canova, where he has
Yeah,
like 20, 40, $50,000 snakes. It might be more
yeah.
more enticing to go over to steal it. I got a lot more. I had a non-snake person tell me this one time that I guess was looking in the snakes, and it was like kind of a gut punch a little bit. But they go, "Why do you have so many brown snakes?" And I'm like, "Oh God, here we go." I was like, talking about a punch in the gut. I was like, "Brown snakes." I go, "What's wrong with brown snakes?" But yeah, because I don't know if maybe they were looking at other snake people like Justin or something. They see all these
Sure.
wild different colors and stuff, and and then they know that you have a big collection or have a bunch of snakes, and they go, "Why don't you have this colored snake?" And
Yep.
stuff. I go, "I have colorful snakes, and I like them all equally, but I don't know. I'm just not into just I don't know. I got to have diversity. There's more to me than just what kind of weird, obscure color or pattern you can put on a snake or get a snake to look like."
Well,
So
and that's a slippery slope where then you can get burnt out on that. Like you said, you get desensitized to how incredible the animal looks, and then it just becomes you want the next animal and the next dopamine hit, and
it becomes real like fast paced and things keep
yeah,
moving on. And yeah, I think I I kind of this almost kind of can go back to the whole documentary that's coming out. But I was telling somebody, or I was telling Dave and them, because we were talking about that documentary too. I go, I think that, well, this involves us trying to be good stewards of the hobby. Whether it's educating the non-snake people and letting them know that this is a thing, and we are responsible and we do care about these animals, and I think it involves us having appreciation for these things for what they are, not what we can try to make them be. Because I think obviously that's why most of us got interested in this hobby to begin with, and it's just sometimes I think we can lose our way like we can in life in general. We just get jaded by things, and we just and I think honestly you see some people and how famous they get in the hobby, and some people want that fame, so they try to chase after it when it's really doesn't really go that way. It's not, we're just selling you a dream essentially. It doesn't mean it's actually how it goes.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's probably a good note to wrap it up on, and just being good stewards. It does make me wonder if there's good tiger keepers out there,
right,
and like and they're just like passionate about the animals, and they have the property and all that, but like that almost every American's like, no, you don't need that, you don't need it,
Exactly. Oh, and I think one other thing can be thrown out there, and I don't, and I would be curious to know how many of these other exotic keepers really help the animals they're interested in the wild, whether it's donating to villages or say something like ball pythons, right? Where really, is there a reason for us to keep exporting like 50 or 100,000 ball python babies out of Africa? Because for a while there, people were talking about, well, it's so they have an industry out there, so they don't just butcher these animals and they become a part of the meat market. Well, some of us make enough money. Why don't we just donate money to some of these countries, and they can not butcher these animals for a living or for food, but they're trying to make a different living that maybe is more, looked down upon, I guess, the meat markets and stuff. But we make enough money with ball pythons. Why don't we just look into maybe raising money for a lot of those villages and for a lot of those people? Because our dollar here can go really far there. So I think there's just other ways. And then even like, say we do still get imported animals. I always thought, well, why don't, instead of we get thousands of these animals, we set up areas and quarantine places where we might get 5 to 10 of these animals as babies, keep them in this quarantine area. And then when they get offered to people like Europe, Japan, or the US, we pay top dollar for these genetically diverse new animals, whether it's a morph or just new bloodlines, and we spend what we would spend for a shipment of $50,000 snakes, we spend on a 10 or 15 snakes or something, say, like a small group, but still enough to create genetic diversity in our collections, but we're getting healthier and better animals, and we're not impacting the environment as heavily as, say, we do now with our thousands or hundreds of animals we take from these places that are just most, destined to die, essentially,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think there's all things you could do, rather they end up getting done, or, someone decides to do something about it. Who knows? Yeah. I think Dan Mallory might be the closest individual I could see doing something like that, though, when it comes to the import stuff, being a steward to that side of the hobby,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I got to get him on the podcast.
Yeah, he'd be a good one for sure.
All right, brother. Thanks for coming back on. I don't know if we beat our previous time. I think the previous episode is still the reigning champ for the amount of time. I think it was like a 2 hour and 21 minute. Right. Or 3 hour and 21.
I could certainly ramble for sure. Whether it's coherent or not is a different story.
That's why we love you, brother.
Right.
All right. Thanks for coming on, man.
Well, thanks for having me.